think of Dr. Jim Benny?
Yeah.
You know, I thought he's too far away to be my doctor, but I'm going, no, that's a nice Cirrus flight. I think Jim's going to become my doctor if he'll have me as a patient. And I'll just have to fly up there for my physicals. Deal?
All right, you can fly me down here.
There you go. That'll work too. Yes, yes. We're going to shift gears and going from clearly a guy with a ton of knowledge and experience in education
To somebody with no knowledge
somebody
at all.
who doesn't know anything. No, we're going from a medical doctor to a pilot. So, but Gordon, seriously, those on the COPA forum, anybody tuning in knows Gordon really, really well. He's one of the, are you one of the founding members of the association?
Yeah.
Yeah, founding member, board member, everything. I won't go into all his pilot credentials. He flew in here in his own private jet and with his darling Papa Lima, whose initials are on the jet. And Gordon's posts on the thread showed that he independently had figured this out and got it. And Gordon, I think I asked him, can you talk about the data-driven approach? Because Gordon is known for being no BS. If you ask a question about anything about aviation, if he either won't answer or if he posts an answer, it's often the end of the thread because it is authoritative, it is definitive, and he backs it up. And when he started to post on this thread, it's kind of like the old television ads for E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. Well, when Gordon Feingold posts on the COPA forum, especially on this kind of stuff, people listen, and it really changed.
Can you get Papa Lima to adopt that?
I will. I was just anytime. Anytime you're having a disagreement, you put her on the phone, and I'll say, hey, look, Gordon said so.
It won't work.
It won't work.
Nice try.
But Jim Glacken will tell you, as people like Kevin Booth, who you'll hear from shortly, and Gordon jumped in on the thread, it shifted. There was, what do they call a tipping point? There was very much a tipping point. So, Mr. Tipping Point, Gordon Feingold.
All right.
Tell us.
So I just kind of want to give my own personal path, how I got here and how I started, adopting this lifestyle and this diet. And it's probably a little atypical. I didn't come from anywhere having any particular disease or problems or high blood pressure or diabetes. I mean, I've been eating, I think, what I previously called a healthy diet, the American healthy diet, for a very long time. How do you remember Covert Bailey? Remember Fit or Fat? I guess I'm the only one. I'm 66, so I guess I can remember that. Nobody else can. But I adopted that, 30 some odd years ago. And, so I was eating pretty lean meats, just chicken and fish, really didn't have beef. And so I was kind of doing that lifestyle. And Pierre, I think you said you were kind of there as well, non-fat milk and so forth. And in terms of exercise, I've been exercising, crazily since, 30 years ago, mostly like 4 or 5, sometimes 6 days a week, aerobic exercise, step aerobics. We just got a Peloton bike. Anybody have a Peloton bike in here? Awesome thing. It's great. So I've been doing that, and like I say, I really haven't had any health problems. The only thing that I started having was BPH, which is basically enlarged prostate. I'm 66. I got to get up 2 or 3 times a night to go and pee, So that's really kind of the only thing. And my cholesterol, I've been getting, regular checkups every year. I get my blood done. Cholesterol had been, in the 180, 190 something when I'm going, I'm okay, I'm under 200, right? That's the number that everybody says, you're under 200. So a year ago, right about now, I went and saw my doc, got my blood done, and my cholesterol was 216. And I said, and he says, well, I ran your numbers. He says, you've got about a 10% chance over a 10-year period of having a cardiac event. And I was thunderstruck. I went, 10%? Would I play Russian roulette with a 10-shooter? I said, no, I wouldn't, And so I took that, and being an OCD person, as Pierre mentioned, and of course my wife, adopting OCD practices as well, I completely went on the Engine 2 diet, or Rip Esselson's diet. I had heard about it actually through aviation. A few months before, I had done a kind of a test flight with a buddy of mine. We posted the results on COPA. And one of the guys that did that with us, he gave me a ride to and from the airport. We were in Scottsdale, and he had a little box of veggies with him as we were going to and from the airport. I go, well, what's with the box of veggies? And he told me about the Engine 2 diet. So that was a little seed in my mind, and I said, okay, and I read the thing, and we adopted it, and being OCD people, we went cold turkey and did it. For Patricia, it wasn't that much of a leap because she had been a vegetarian for a number of years, and for me, it really wasn't that much of a leap either, but we just did it, and we did it 100%. And so, I did not find it onerous or an inconvenience, really. I was enjoying it. And as I think many of you discovered and can discover, I mean, there's a ton of stuff to eat. I mean, the picture of, okay, you're eating, carrot sticks and broccoli, it's just couldn't be further from the truth. So 7 weeks later, I went and had my blood done again, and my total cholesterol was 144. So I went 72 points in 7 weeks. And I called up the doc. I said, hey, and he goes, how did you do that? And that was a real telling question, for me, because it meant that he had no clue that that was even possible without drugs or, restraints. And so it definitely put a different view in my mind of medicine. And he's a family doc, and he was floored. He was absolutely floored. So, so what happened that was a little unexpected is that I lost more weight than I thought I was going to lose. I didn't do it to lose weight. Again, I'm not the typical person that has problems with all that. I've been between 155 and 165 for my whole life. And I started out, I was 160 when I started out. And after about 10 weeks, I had lost 18 pounds. I went down to 142. Now, I was stuffing my face with food. And I'm going, wow, I mean, I'm eating, I love to eat, who doesn't love to eat, right? And so I actually lost more weight than I wanted to. And one downside was I did lose muscle mass as well. So I didn't take up, at the time I was doing this, increasing my lifting or being a little more cognizant. Of course, I wasn't quite sure where I was going. So I was very surprised that I lost that much weight. I mean, so I adopted eating between meals, and I'm now back up to about 150, 152, which is, I think, pretty good for me. So that was one thing I'd say, if you do this, it's so effective that you kind of watch that a little bit and see you don't go too far. So that was something that I learned about it. In terms of change of energy or whatever, I mean, I really didn't feel much of a change. I was energetic and active before, and I'm energetic and active now. So changing my diet certainly didn't do anything in the negative, and I feel great as I did before. But the one thing that I did not anticipate was that my BPH, my prostate, my getting up 2 or 3 times a night, after about 3 or 4 months on this diet, I kind of suddenly realized, wait a minute, I'm not doing that anymore. And now I'm getting up 0 or maybe sometimes 1 time, and I can pee across the room now. Before I couldn't knock off, So I mean, I did not expect that at all. So that was it actually did something. So the one thing that I did have as a complaint, it actually worked on. But I wanted to mention the one thing about my doc, and I talked to him afterwards, and I talked to my doctor, and like I said, he was clueless about that a diet could do this. And then I realized something. I realized that when he told me that you have a 10% chance of a cardiac event in the next 10 years, he meant that in a positive way, like you only have a 10% chance. He thought that was great. I didn't think that was great. So that was the disconnect also, was that, it's okay, we accept this in our patients that, you can be on the margins. Yeah, I don't want to be on the margins. I want to live. I got to entertain my wife for the next 30 years, So anyway, so that was kind of a revelation, was that his thinking not only didn't understand that it was that a plant-based diet could do something like this, and he's now looking at me as and maybe going to learn something, I think, but that there was an expectation in his patients, like, you got half of my patients are going to die from heart disease. Don't worry about it. Well, I was worried about it. So the other thing is, I mentioned, that adopting this. I'm the cook in our house, and adopting this diet and the changes in what you can eat and all that. We haven't had a problem at all. I mean, have we? We've been cooking everything. I've now got a new cornbread recipe I'm going to take, and so I found out that you can eat pretty much anything, and really you adopt some new habits. And this is rice paper, by the way, so you can. There's a few things you might adopt that are a little unusual, but you can eat just fine and enjoy your dining. So that's my talk, and if you have any questions for me, hit me up later. So anyway, it's been a great journey. So all right.
That was cool. Thank you.
Why am I sitting on this? Oh, okay.
There you go. Yeah, you can flip those switch off.
Yeah, I will. They don't want to hear.
No. So what we're going to do, just to keep things moving, then we're going to take a little short break, because after lunch, maybe everybody will want to take a short break. We'll get Kevin Booth up next, and then we'll take a short break, and then it'll be Mark Jones, and then we'll have like a group Q&A. Huh? Oh. And that way, I think it'll give time for questions to percolate, you know, because as you hear these different ideas and how they're being presented, hopefully you guys are thinking about questions like, really? And I'm actually, I think I've told each of you individually, if you have questions for each other, our panelists here, let's ask away. Let's get into it. Go, what? You said that? Does that make sense? You know, let's get, I'd like to see a lively discussion if we can. Anyway, Kevin Booth is another one of the guys who chimed in on the forum when Jim Glacken was getting crucified early on and really helped keep him alive. Because again, Kevin's influential. Kevin's a spine surgeon from the Bay Area, although recently he's moved up into God's country in the west foothills near Sonora. And he's also influential on the Copa Forum, been a Cirrus pilot for, I don't remember how long, 12 years. And so generously and freely will give of his advice. Over on the medical forum side, people ask questions. We had a famous situation where a pilot crashed the Cirrus and broke his neck in 2 places, and I was helping the guy out at the hospital, and Kevin would just very freely give his time, second opinion from a distance, or even reading images, you know, if you send him CDs and or DVD, or whatever you call those, your images. So we're real lucky to have him on the forum. And surprise, the guy who's a bone doctor chimes in and turns out had been through his own journey, and as a result had a lot to say on this subject. So I invited Kevin to come. He very graciously, along with Jody, agreed to come, and so please welcome Kevin Booth.
Thank you. As we say, you know, everybody has a journey, and part of this was to sort of share a little bit of my journey, and also to talk a little about what I commonly encounter as sort of alternatives. And I think probably in, oh, can I control that? Okay. Alternatives to weight loss. I think most of the patients that I see that, you know, have obesity, a very common problem, obviously have high blood pressure, diabetes, and all the other things that go along with that. And invariably they're looking for solutions to that. More and more we're advocating complicated solutions like surgery. And personally, when I was 40, I'm 52 now, I became diagnosed with this type 2 diabetic, and I was overweight, super stressed out surgeon, working 80, 100 hours a week, little time to take care of myself. You wonder why your doctors aren't telling you how to take care of yourselves. Most of them don't know how to take care of themselves. And tried different diets. I went full keto, and the results of that were initially pretty interesting. I was running around the hospital trying to dipstick my urine 3 times a day to make sure I was in compliance. And I did lose weight, and then ultimately I think it's unsustainable, and I'll share that a little bit. And had an epiphany with a friend of mine this past summer. And so first I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of ketogenic diet and what that involves, because I think that's probably the most common question or reason people look at, you know, plant-based versus keto. For my discussion, I'm going to sort of equate the terms whole food, plant-based, and vegan together. I know there's certain, you know, vegan milkshakes and cheesecake and crap, and I think if that's what you're doing, you probably ought to just eat meat. But let's see. So the ketogenic diet, the true ketogenic diet is a very, very low carbohydrate diet. In most cases, less than 25 grams of carbohydrate, certainly less than 50 and 4% of your calories. 90% of your calories come from fat, kind of unbelievable. 6% from protein, and it takes about 3 or 4 days to get into a state of ketosis. You can dipstick. A lot of times you've been to your doctor, they put the dipstick in, they look for glucose and stuff, but also look for ketones, most commonly in diabetics. But also if you're ketogenic, which means that your body has shifted its metabolism. And so clearly it's not the same as a paleo or an Atkins, or now there's this pegan diet, which is sort of like paleo vegan, or other low carb, high protein diets. There is a medical indication for it, and it is still used in children that have refractory epileptic seizures. That's where it was discovered. Those are kids that you give them all the medicines, try all the surgeries, whatever, they still seize. You often hear it say, hey, it reduces the rate of cancer. Well, it doesn't really. It reduces the rate for some glioblastomas, which are terrible, and John McCain is an obvious case of that. But it does often result in weight loss, and that's sort of where it got its legs. I think the biggest challenge is there are really no long-term health studies that tell us what happens if you can maintain a ketogenic diet for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. So the premise is that you convert to a fat-based metabolism. So most of the time we run on a carbohydrate-based metabolism, and you have to deprive yourself of carbohydrates. And when you do that for 3 or 4 days, it's the same as starvation. Your liver and your body shifts gears. You start making these things called ketones, and ultimately that's what you burn. And your body, interestingly, will preferentially convert its own fat stores to ketones, hence the interesting weight loss side effect, or ultimately the goal of this. So if we look at sort of a 2,000 calorie diet, typically 165 grams would come from fat, saturated fat. Bacon is encouraged. Bacon is not a health food, by the way, no matter what you read. Less than 40 grams of carbohydrates. That's really hard. I mean, if you look at your packages and labels and stuff, to get under 40 or under 25 is really, really hard. And that's why there's an emphasis on eating so much meat and crap, because you can't really eat a lot of fruits and veggies. And 75 grams of protein, which is more than you need. So if you follow this diet, you really end up very restricted in anything that has any sugar in it. For example, one banana has 27 grams of carbs, so you'd blow the diet with one banana in a day. 1 cup of broccoli, 6, so you can see broccoli is better than bananas if you're trying to be ketogenic. But it has some risks, and not, as we learned earlier from the labs that we saw, that not everybody who's skinny is healthy. Lots of us would probably trade healthy for skinny, or skinny for healthy. We won't ask the devil question, what would you rather be, thin or healthy? But certainly increased LDL or bad cholesterol results in coronary artery disease. Anybody know what Atkins died of? Had a heart attack, right? Yeah, so there you go. The guy who pioneers the diet croaks. Nutritionary deficiencies, if you're purely ketogenic, the micro minerals and vitamins potentially. Liver problems, we have a common problem now with obesity, and people have what we call fatty liver or non-alcoholic steatohepatosis. That's a problem with the liver being overburdened with fat. It doesn't work very well. And if your protein metabolism is high, you can result in kidney problems. It also affects brain metabolism. If you're low on glucose, it can cause confusion and mood swings, and honey, it's not because I'm low on glucose. And then obviously constipation. If you're eating a whole bunch of meats and not eating plants, you have low fiber. Fiber is probably the one thing most people are deficient on, not protein or anything else, and that can result in GI problems. So I ripped off some evidence, and some of you guys will see these that hang around on the internet. And no apologies for plagiarism here. I'm not getting paid for this. So. But if we look at keto risks, obviously, processed meat, beef jerky, salami, beef sticks, whatever, are kind of the go-tos. And, that is a known human carcinogen, sort of like plutonium. So most of us wouldn't go and get plutonium jerky. And so, a diet that emphasizes that is certainly of concern, I think, health-wise. Probable carcinogens, red meat consumption. And all these other things are terrible for you too, and cancer causers. So the main go-to thing to stay on this diet is probably terribly bad for you. What happens when you are in a ketonic state or ketogenic state? It turns out that those ketones actually are sort of fuels for cancers. And this is an interesting paper because it actually suggests that making anti-ketone or ketone inhibitors would be a form of chemotherapy. And so, do you really want to be on a diet long-term where your saturated fat content is high, you're eating known carcinogens, the byproduct of your diet is a chemical that causes tumors to go bonkers? None of that sounding really juicy, although you might be thin. If we look at kind of like, what are the other evidence that maybe things like fruits and vegetables are good? And this is a study that says that about 3 million people die on the planet a year because they don't get enough fruits and vegetables. So clearly there's something to that as well. Well, which one works better? Is it smarter to reduce your calories from fat or from carbohydrates? And you look at large studies, there's lots of these, and clearly calorie for calorie dietary fat restriction results in more body fat loss. So that wins. So what's healthy? I don't know, that one looks better to me, but This is the broad study, which I think is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's all over the internet as far as supporting different things. But if you look at the conclusions here, and basically we're talking potentially about weight loss in this particular presentation versus long-term health. And ideally, you can tie those things together because you'd like to have low body weight and good long-term health. But it says, to the best of our knowledge, this research has achieved greater weight loss at 6 and 12 months than any other trial that does not limit energy, so that doesn't calorie limit you, or mandate regular exercise. So what would happen if you actually added a lower calorie diet and exercise to that? Win, win, win. Some lifestyle changes too, and then we start to get all areas of harmony intact. But so clearly the evidence is you don't have to go and eat just fat and meat and horrible things for you in order to lose weight. In fact, the evidence is probably contrary to that in most things. So I mentioned my little journey. So I turned 40 12 years ago, was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, started on the usual things, metformin, a good buddy of mine's an endocrinologist, my primary care doctor is a good friend of mine. Nobody told me to eat plants. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do the ketogenic thing. I lost a little bit of weight, it bounced back. I try and exercise, I get overworked at work, I get stressed out, exercise would fall by the wayside, I go up 30 pounds, down 30 pounds. And then I kind of had a bit of a disaster, honestly, health-wise. And so right around when I was about 50, I started having some episodic chest pain. I really wasn't sure what it was, and maybe it was anxiety or stress, but it was there, and doctors always die because they don't appreciate real true chest pain. And so I went and got some labs done, and good God, my cholesterol is terrible, my LDL's one, and my hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of your, so I have diabetic control, is 8.1, and non-diabetics are less than 6. At 8.1 is terrible, and I was 285 pounds. And so I went and saw my cardiologist, who's a friend of mine, and I'm like, hey, I got this chest pain, my labs look like shit, sorry. And what do I do? And he's like, you stupid guy. He's a Chinese guy. He's like, you stupid guy. I'm like, well, straighten me out. What do I do? He's like, I'm going to put you on insulin. I'm like, hell no, you're not putting me on insulin. Something else has got to change. And so at that point, I kind of went sort of paleo vegan kind of, and was still wandering a little bit trying to figure out what to do. It was clear I needed to reduce my carbohydrates. It's not always easy in a pure plant-based diet to go low carbohydrates unless you really start getting into it. And so I went fishing in Alaska last July, taking my kids up there every year. And a buddy of mine who's a spine surgeon in Los Angeles, who was also a resident at Loma Linda, where I went, has been vegan for about 15 years. His entire family's vegan. He had twins 2 years ago. The infants are vegan. His wife's a vet. They're vegan. And he's, and so we're on this boat fishing for 3 days. And all I hear is vegan, 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 vegan. You know how somebody's a vegan? They tell you they're a vegan, It's like the patient that tells me he's not an alcoholic because he doesn't go to the meetings. And I just look, I'm a doctor. I know, calories, carbohydrates, they're little units of energy. It doesn't really matter. They all come from somewhere. You burn them up, turn them into whatever you want. Life is great. And the other thing that was happening is, I've got Jody, who's my young wife, and we were getting married. I plan to get married in that September 8th. And, I'm 30 pounds overweight or 40 pounds overweight, feeling like a fat guy. And my cholesterol sucks, and I'm getting worked up for chest pain, and I'm on this boat confined with a vegan who's driving me absolutely batshit crazy. But at the same time, he's sending me all this data, and honestly, for weeks. And my son, who's now a sophomore in college, won the state of California debate championship. So he's not an easy guy to win an argument with. And he's going back and forth with my friend Walter, and it was just this kind of, almost like a blog. And so I said, he's like, do it. What do you got to lose? I'm like, well, that's true. I mean, what I'm doing now does work. And so around about July 5th or 6th of last year, when I got back, I'm like, fine, this is what we're doing, honey. And, hit it pretty hard, got the How Not to Die book, started reading all the things, signing up for the blogs. And in a few months, cholesterol's down to 170, LDL 66, A1C down to 6.4, and I've lost 35 pounds. And, I'm not super good at this. I try really hard. I'm probably about 95% compliant. If somebody invites me over for a hamburger, I'll probably have a salad at their place, but I'm not going to tell them I'm not going to, eat their dinner or whatever. And I think, if you go out to dinner at a nice restaurant, I think Gordon, mentioned, if you go out to a, Michelin star restaurant, maybe you eat the foods that you want to eat. And I think that is a little easier way for me, but to work this into my life. And obviously, my wife is thin and healthy and fit and runs triathlons, and she probably could eat, hamburgers all day long and go to McDonald's. But so, my anecdotal results are interesting. I think one of the things that was interesting in the COPA thread is that there were a lot of people coming out and sort of giving their story after a while. And you start to string all these anecdotal results together, and you start to have a population. And the population, at least of people that do this, the results are typical. And then when you look at the actual science, where they actually study real populations, not just a group of guys telling their story, it's really, amazing. So this is a picture of obviously me, beautiful wife, my brother, and he's actually 3 years younger than I am, but he's a little ahead of me on the weight gain, and his wife, and he's a paramedic firefighter, certainly somebody in healthcare. His wife's a nurse, and this is in Hawaii, and I didn't really want to have that kind of health for the rest of my life, and however that would be. And so I think that you can turn things around, and it doesn't have to be difficult or unpleasant or really restrictive. And I think if you're able to blend the different pillars in, obviously better diet, a little bit of exercise, some personal health of meditation or whatever you do spiritually, and de-stressing, suddenly all of those things become huge layer upon layer. But certainly your wellness of starting with diet is really pretty critical. So that's my little story. And yeah.
One. Wow, Kevin, thank you. I really didn't know. I kind of had an idea what the other talks were going to be like. That one, I didn't get the depth of it. And thanks for the personal side of it as well as the professional side of it. What a brilliant blend. Thank you. That's good stuff. Let's take a little break. Restroom break, glass of water, whatever, and we'll bring Mark Jones on. All right. I hope you're thinking about good questions.
1, 2, 3.
Lots of social time so the pilots can do
Oh, before people get settled,
Hang
please
flying.
please grab one each
handouts.
of the handouts.
Because he's got more like fine print, and
Yeah.
it's hard to read off the screen. So everybody grab it. Oh, Karen's gonna
There we go.
pass.
Okay.
Let's pass him. So we're gonna cruise through Mark's presentation, and then we'll do Q&A, and then time for lots of pilot
4 o'clock.
socializing and wine and more food. It's all about the food. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, tonight's dinner is rice paper. Gordon got it.
High fiber.
You had a piece.
Yeah. Yeah. A little Cholula on it, and it's okay.
Are we live? All right. Does it say, do we know if we have anybody at this point? It's been long. We still have a few hanging in there? We got 5.
All right.
I think I saw Barry Lerman was on, Jeff Bassett. I'm not sure if Carlos said he was going to be on. Hi, guys.
Hi, Barry.
Next time we do this, I hope we can get to something like this again, you guys got to come out. Huh? Are they missing out? It's the food. God bless you. Speakers are wonderful, but it's the food. Am I registering over there? Yeah. 1, 2? Yeah, we're just not on the speakers. Yeah.
Yeah.
They can't hear me.
Yeah.
All right, because I saw it move. All right. Anyway, I said hi to the guys that I think are on, Barry Lerman, Jeff Bassett, Carlos, if you're there. I don't know. Dick McLaughlin maybe took a break from his talk at Flying Doctors. Say hi to all the Flying Doctors. Hope you don't mind my using you as a kind of a foil to our approach. They're a wonderful bunch. Dick McLaughlin, while we're getting everybody set, is the guy who flew to Haiti. The Coltons here are nodding, they all know, and he inspired me, and I ended up flying to Haiti, and we did earthquake relief, and then he kept going back, and he fought cholera, and set up clinics and shipping containers, and does amazing work over there. So he's at Flying Doctors trying to get them rallied to keep going back to Haiti, because there's ongoing need, right, for help. All right. Let me see. I think we're up to last, but very much not least. A lot of the, both, two of our, both Jim Benny and the others have talked about McDougall. And Dr. McDougall is this kind of pioneer and built this whole organization. And this is from now the side of someone who's been through the program, and you started to hear a little bit from Mark earlier. So Mark's what's called a star McDougall. And they put, I don't know, thousands of people through the program over there where Jim used to work at. And there's a handful of these guys who are the star McDougalls, not only because of their results, but now he's retired and they've become very committed. And now up at Renown Health, our biggest hospital healthcare system in northern Nevada, has, I think, it's similar to your lifestyle medicine. They call it integrative medicine group operating out of Renown. And several of those medical doctors up there now are referring patients to Mark for coaching and training and making these diet and lifestyle changes. So we're beginning to just see a little bit, again, of something other than writing a pack of prescription meds and procedures. So I've met Mark. If I had a choice between taking pills and hanging out with Mark, I'll hang out with Mark anytime. So anyway,
You're too
our
kind.
star McDougall and his wife Hilma is very much part of the program. And I'm going to leave it up to you guys how to integrate, the content.
Sure.
They each have different areas of specialty in the content, in how to implement, how to do a transition, and that sort of thing. So, Mark Jones.
Okay. Thank you. Give him a hand, right? Okay. Oh man. Okay. Lots of thoughts we're going through all at once. But as you know, I'm not medical, but I do have a mouth and I can talk. And I'm reminded that this is the time of any presenter that is the dreaded time. It is called by many terms, but it's essentially the dead zone. And that is everyone's lunch is starting to kick in and they're getting kind of sleepy and everything. So, but I'll try to keep you awake. One thing not being, let's see. Did everyone get a copy of the handout at least that's there on the board? Okay. And then what we'll do afterwards, we will, after my part of the presentation, I believe we're going to do a Q&A, and part of that will be Hilma involved, and those are the other two handouts that really tell you what you really need to know, and that is how the heck do I do this if I should choose to make the change. One thing I want to do in my talk, there's this health disclaimer here. And no one's done that so far, and I feel ridiculous doing it, but I feel like it's a little bit what the fast food restaurants got passed in terms of laws. Does anyone know what I'm about to be referring to? We call it the hamburger or the cheeseburger laws. Does anyone know what that is? Okay, years ago, when big fast food saw what happened to the cigarette industry and whatnot, they got Congress to pass laws that essentially said, ain't our fault if we serve unhealthy food and someone chooses to eat it. And the actual, if you Google it, I'm trying to remember the name of it, is something like Personal Health Responsibility Act. And what it says is you can't sue Burger King or McDonald's or whatever when you find out that you're type 2 diabetic or that you've got heart disease and that sort of thing. So what sort of incentive do you think those big food manufacturers have now in terms of fear of being sued? And so that's, anyway, but I have a health disclaimer here that says, don't change your diet or lifestyle if you're ill or on medication without the advice of a qualified healthcare professional. Okay, I mean, almost goes without saying, but you know, I don't have MD after my name. I have MBA, I have CPA, I've been a CFO of major companies, but but it's not MD or DO or anything like that. So anyway.
Ben Gillette says in his brilliant talk, he said, if you take medical advice from a Las Vegas magician, you deserve to die.
Medical advice from a Las Vegas magician, right? Not musician, not physician, magician. Okay, all right. So anyway, I was going to say next slide, but I've got the next slide in my pocket here, if I know how to do it. Woo, it worked. Okay, the next page, and I apologize for the internet audience. I thought I was going to be able to easily zoom in on things. Just follow with my arm waving and talking.
Tell them over the microphone that if they just email or call or anything, we'll get a PDF file emailed.
Yeah, the PDF is here. We may not be able to do it right now while I'm talking, but if you want it afterwards, certainly we have it available, and we can email it to you. So anyway, okay. You already heard a little bit of my presentation as we were getting ready. My grandfather died at 63 years old of a heart attack. My dad died almost to the day, 63 years old as a heart attack. And I was 58 years old in a cardiologist's office who told me I had weeks to live. That was almost 10 years ago. I was put on so many medications, you wouldn't believe it. Hilma took a picture of me surrounded by these bottles of medication. I am off all meds now, except for one minor one. Somehow in the process, my thyroid decided to do something else for a living. And so I'm taking an artificial thyroid. But outside of that, nothing. It's wonderful. In fact, I love breakfast because I will oftentimes have a grapefruit with my breakfast. And does anyone know, if you're on a statin, what happens if you have grapefruit? It knocks it out. So my little victory dance after being on such heavy statins that I had a retinal detachment, I think. well, I definitely had that retinal detachment, but I think it was because of the heavy statins. My victory dance is that I get to have grapefruit, and I'm drug-free on that. So that's a neat thing. Okay. So it was a scary thing. I was jumping out of a burning building. Hilma, my wonderful wife, who years later actually wrote a family cookbook where she took all the family favorite recipes, and many of them, well, she kept most of them in there, and then on the opposing page, she unclogged the recipe, as she called it. So it was really neat, and this was a passed down log for our kid. Yeah, here we go. Here's date nut bread clogger, and then I just open up randomly, and then here's date nut bread unclogged. Sure, yeah. Yeah. So, and the other thing, kind of the connection here, through Hilma's side of the family, I do have a connection to you all, and that is to COPA, that we just drove down to Prescott, Arizona, for the graduation of our nephew, the blood relative on Hilma's side, who graduated from Embry-Riddle. And this summer he's getting his, is it training? Pilot training certificate. So he has the, yeah, so anyway. So he's really jazzed about this. And the other is, in our church, we just happened to have a couple of weeks ago, Mission Aviation Fellowship. The people come from that. And if you're flying a plane and you like to go into tough spots, like beautiful grassy fields with no landing strip. Oh, here's a float plane. These people, talking to them, it's something else. So anyway, I was thrilled hearing these people talk, and I grabbed a few of their brochures, which I'll leave there on the piano. This just happens to be their 2019 calendar. So I thought, yeah, there's a connection. When I first moved up to Nevada, I was working for a company that was providing ultra high risk security. Something happened. I don't know. Hold on. Lights on. Yeah, hang on, folks. We have a technical issue with. Yeah. Hey, hang on, folks. We're still trying to get the projector to turn back on. Oh, something. Okay. Okay, something's.
It's flashing power.
Yeah. Okay. Stand by. Stand by. Okay. So, and they can see on the screen there. Okay. All right. All right, that's good. Okay, well, all of you that are here have a copy of the handout, so you can go on paper to where I am, which would be page 3. Megan, can you go ahead and there we go. So page 3. So in my journey, I felt, everyone is uniquely qualified. Where I felt uniquely qualified is growing up in a professor's household. My family is so medical that I'm really the black sheep of the family, just becoming a CPA sort of thing. Okay, we have things beeping around. And,
I think it just lost the connection.
Okay. All right. So anyway, I felt uniquely qualified to really do some of the research because I don't mind talking to professor types and finding out about how things are really working. And it's taken me about 10 years to go from where I was to where I am today. And part of where I was the last time I got up here, we have something came back on. Okay. And so part of where I was that I had lost about half the weight and I thought I was doing okay. And then the holidays hit. And then the doctor by the way, the doctor very reluctantly originally had let me go back. There you go, perfect. The doctor very reluctantly when I started, he put me on this heavy dose of statin, and like I say, I had the retinal detachment and other things, but I was losing weight. He emails me saying, "Oh my gosh, your cholesterol's gotten so low, chop the pills in half." So I chopped the pills in half. Go on about another month, "Hey doc, now I'm emailing him saying, looks like everything's in pretty good shape here. Can I chop the pills in half again?" Yeah, okay, so now I'm taking 1/4 of the original doses of everything. And then about a month later, after blood tests and everything, "Hey doc, can I go off?" And this poor doctor, I didn't realize till later, this was Kaiser in California, he goes, "I don't know. When I put someone on a statin, they're on for life. I don't know. I've never had someone go off the statin." And he basically, ethically and professionally, according to medical shop standards at the time and everything, he couldn't approve my going off. So he basically said, "Mark, I can't stop you from doing whatever you're going to do." So I went off. And the other thing is, I had probably a 40-year bout of severe arthritis. If you notice, I turned my head with my whole body. My head is something called ankylosing spondylitis. I was out of school for a year, had to be homeschooled because I had a rheumatoid arthritis that just went rampant through my body when I was in high school. So I'm very familiar with joint pain, and I can certainly understand sufferers that have a hot spot, wherever. I mean, mine was just all over the place. So. I understand that. Well, anyway, okay, so now many years later, one of the meds I looked at, I went, "Wow, that's weird. My neck doesn't hurt the way it normally does." And I looked at the bottle of medicine, it said, which I've been taking for years, said, "Take as needed for pain." And I go, "Huh, okay, I don't have any pain." So it's been 8 years since I've taken my non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, and I feel great. Now, it didn't reverse the damage that the arthritis had done, but believe me, I can relate to someone that is suffering with arthritic hot spots. I mean, you feel like a ice pick is being ground into joints, and it's tender all over the place. But so now this doctor, when it comes to my heart and cholesterol, emails me and says, I knew you couldn't do it. You're going to have to go back on the meds." And these are the meds for the statins. And it's at that point that I went to the McDougall 10-day program. I said, "Okay, I got to get this thing dialed in." I'd lost about 30 pounds, and so now I've lost a total of 70 pounds. And that's where I met Dr. McDougall and many of the others and really got into it. And for those on the internet, you can embarrassingly enough see I have 2 Star McDougall interviews from some of the McDougall things that I've done. So anyway, it's been an interesting journey. And my purpose is for anyone who wants to make the change, I want to help you. I'm retired now as a CPA. I'm still helping a couple of pretty good sized family businesses in California. Excuse me. But I enjoy doing this because this is what I want to do, and that is helping people. And what's really difficult right now, I used to celebrate the democratization of information. And that is the internet lets you freely get information, and someone who is either for or against a cause can speak their voice. Well, the problem is when it comes to food, everyone is claiming they have something healthy. This is the healthy this. This is the healthy that. But no one's really affirmatively talking about health. Everything has this healthy aspect to it. And so I'm here because I have been down this journey for the 10 years, and I'm enough science-based that I really have an appreciation for science. And even though it may sound like I might be bashing the medical profession a bit, I come from a medical family, and I understand where, where physicians and psychiatrists and that sort of thing come from. And I understand it quite a bit. And I've been the CFO for a couple medical clinics, so I understand from just a day-to-day operations standpoint what that's like. Okay, so key points to consider, says I, as I get my notes here. Really, food has changed from the foods. There wouldn't be a need for this type of talk 200 years ago. If we could get together with our horses and buggies and talk. You know, if that sun's hitting you too hard, just go ahead and move. We have some audience members that the skylight has shifted the sun around and such. But anyway, we wouldn't need to have this talk because people, for the most part, before we had refrigerators, does anyone know what would happen to that deer that got shot or the calf that got slaughtered after about a week? Yeah, it would spoil. I went on a hiking trip and I bought some hamburger and I put it in what I thought was a pretty good cooler and came back a couple of days later, opened up the package, and it was moving. It was so gross. It was maggots, just all through it. But yeah, because of refrigeration, we are able to live like kings and queens for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And also because of highly processed foods that give things a long shelf life. One of the crackers we had for lunch here was from a company called Mary's Gone Crackers. I actually helped them move from the Gridley operation in California up to Reno. And I understand from a food processor standpoint. Also a company called Don Sumor who makes the Madeleine crackers that you get like at Starbucks and that sort of thing. I'm not claiming that everything is a health food, but what I'm saying is I understand from a manufacturer standpoint. Does anyone know what the holy trinity is of food manufacturing? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with food ingredients. Sugar? Salt. There we go. You get salt, fat, and sugar in the right combination, you can make just about anything taste a whole lot better than it did originally. Has anyone had boiled beef with no seasoning or anything? You just boil it? Or chicken? Yeah, it's pretty much inedible unless you add in these seasonings. Well, the food manufacturers spend a lot of time testing things, seeing what works well and so on. And so as we're buying these packaged foods that have preservatives, everything else in them, what sort of chance do we have? I mean, these people, they've got our mouths and taste buds wired. They know what tastes good. I mean, personally, my downfall is if I see a bag of Fritos corn chips, I'll eat them. I like that salty, whatever it is flavor, and I suppose it's vegan, but it's full of oil, way too much salt, and so on. Okay, food has changed, and most of us are overfed and undernourished. If I was to put up a chart here showing overweightness within the United States or obesity by states, and I've seen a presentation where it's a map of the United States and it shows in the succeeding years what's going on. And I'm going, huh? How can that be? How is it that in the United States and worldwide we're getting fatter? And I will say, you can be unhealthy at any weight, right? But the amount that we're overweight as a country is a pretty good indicator of our general health. Now, I've met many people that are 300 pounds that are pretty darn healthy. And I've met some people that are almost anorexic and that are in bad shape. And you medical professionals here have seen that whole scheme there. Okay. These are exciting days, though. I talked about the democratization of information, but there's 2019, as I was looking into it, and I'm at the bottom of page 3 here, there was some pretty cool stuff that had come out just recently. One, it's a few years old, Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Die. Dr. Benny had pretty much gone through a lot of that. Does anyone know why the term chronic disease, and by the way, most of the things that we die from are what is labeled chronic disease. Does anyone have any idea why it has the word chronic? It's what? Time, yeah. Not going to go away. I'm here to tell you, well, first of all, none of us are getting out of here alive, right? We already know that. Yeah. We had one standout that was good. But short of that, what Dr. Greger did was he took all the top killers in the United States, and he wrote a book about it. And there's one chapter per, and I think there's a copy of the book over there. It's called How Not to Die. And he's not saying how to not die. He is saying, when you do die, what are you not going to die of? That makes sense? Kind of a little twist on things. And he went through, and by the way, Dr. Greger is a wonderful communicator. I have one of his videos that we'll look at. But anyway, that book was a landmark book, and there were several books before that. There was the China study in particular that I thought would change the world, and didn't so much. But the other book that had come out in 2019, brand new, is the one that we have seen earlier, Undo It. It's a riff on the do it. Well, if you've done it by doing a bad diet and lifestyle, this is how you undo it. And it's a great book, and he's looking at balancing not only diet but exercise, meditation, and I forget the fourth, but there's four, huh? Love. There we go. Love as a pillar. The other is, right at the end of 2018, The Economist and Forbes came out with declaring that 2019 was going to be the year of the vegan. Now, do you think that The Economist or Forbes has suddenly gone vegan and plant-based themselves? No, they didn't. But what they were doing is they were recognizing that there is an economic groundswell going on where veganism or plant-based items are going to become more mainstream. The other one, which I found just amazing, is The Lancet. The Lancet, at the very beginning of 2019, came out with a massive study. And this study made headlines in Europe and in Canada. I could barely find anything on it here in the United States.
No, I was just saying it's true.
Yeah. And what it did was, this is a stunning study. I mean, I know it's after lunch and all that. By the way, I'm finding it a little warm in here. Is everyone okay? Yeah, just,
By having the view block, we can cut a lot of solar heat by closing this.
oh, I think if we just get some air, more air circulating.
Air going, but
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
basically this, the air's already
Well, you know what? I don't want to disrupt things too much. Okay, a show of hands. How many people would like it a little bit cooler? Okay. How many are comfortable? Leave it alone. Okay, most everyone's comfortable. Okay. All right, so stop right there. But thank you. Okay. So the Lancet study came out, and what it wasn't a study, an original study that they had done themselves, but was what's called a meta-analysis, where they took about 200 studies from the past 40 years, tracking 135 million person years of data. Now, if you track 135 million person years of information, and you find something that's like 0.5%, that's probably pretty accurate. You know, well, we found 0.5%, blah, 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 because, well, they came up with a 15 to 30% reduction in mortality from all causes as people ate more fiber. Now, does pulled pork have fiber in it?
no.
How about dried mackerel?
No.
Oh. Really? No. That's right. There is no fiber in any animal product. I don't care how tough it may be. There's no dietary fiber. And fiber is what the critters in our gut live on. And they are beneficial critters. In fact, I'm told, I find this hard to believe, but cell by cell, there's a greater count of the foreign critters that are in our gut than us. I don't know how that's possible, because I feel bigger than my intestines, but that's what I'm told. But at any rate, they found that by having a higher fiber diet, and they didn't put any limit on it. As they did the study, they found the more you had the fiber, the more reasons for mortality decreased. I mean, that is stunning. And a person that works with Renown, which is where I'm helping out right now, was over in France at the time, and she said morning, noon, and night there were announcements on TV and the internet and so on over there in France. Like I say, when it happened here, I didn't see anything. That's stunning information to think that. And so how are we going to get more fiber? It's a word that starts with a C. Yeah. The only thing that has fiber in it is carbohydrates. Now, what do food manufacturers like to do with those nasty fibers that are, sorry, I may be walking out of the camera here. Yeah, those nasty food manufacturers want us to have white flour. By the way, wheat flour is nothing more than that's flour from wheat, but it's had all the fiber stripped out of it, and it turns a nice, pretty white, and it does the flour things. And you know, it's tough to make a good donut with whole wheat flour. I have to admit, that was a joke, everybody, but that's okay. Okay. I think I'm gonna. Yep. Okay. The Department of Health and Social Care in England, by the way, I've flipped to page 4, top of page 4. The British healthcare system made a major shift to prevention. This is amazing. Their November 2018 announcement titled, "Prevention is Better Than Cure," has announced, so that's November 2018, it's not even a year old, has announced major funding shifts towards prevention, not just cure. And having folks take more charge of their own health and enjoyment of life. Does anyone know? So Canada, for example, and England have what's called a what healthcare system? Terrible. It's a socialized medicine. In other words, who's basically footing the bill? Yeah, general population, but the government then through the general population. Here in the United States, our health care has a different motivation outside of HMOs. But most care is something called fee for service. Does anyone know what fee for service means? Okay, fee for service. Yeah, what it means is the doctor doesn't earn any money, or healthcare provider doesn't earn any money unless you show up and use their services. In Britain and Canada, with a socialized medicine, if you don't show up, they actually make more money, right? Because they're still getting paid no matter what. Yeah. Oh, it is. Okay, I'm getting corrected.
Fee payer, so when you have volume as a physician in Canada until the money runs out, which is usually about 7 months, and then you can either go into private practice for 3 or 4 months, or you can take a vacation.
Wow.
It is too. So, it's a misconception. Common.
Okay. Well, I'm thankful I'm being corrected here before we go too far with it. Is capped. But what is interesting is, for example, Canada, I can't imagine the United States coming out with this. The Canadian dietary guidelines came out that basically say, as much as you can, eat plant-based, and your beverage should be water. That was amazing. This is the brand new. See, it doesn't have a date on it, but it came out this year. That is very interesting. The other is Kaiser hospitals, where my brother was a practicing physician, and when we lived in California, I was a part of. I'm told that they have over 10,000 of their health providers that are trained in nutrition as an augmentation to medicine. I don't want to go as far as to say lifestyle medicine, but they basically get it, because for Kaiser, they make money by your being a paying customer but not using the services, right? Whereas we are in more of a fee-for-service model, which makes it very tough for us to cut back. Anyway, we're going to have to do some things differently, I think. And thank you for the clarification on that. Okay. One thing I want to do also is just to show an historical perspective. This is it's called many different things, but it's basically, you'll find it under something called a survivor's curve. I'm sorry for those on the internet looking, but what you'll see is a chart with a series of lines. The one I happen to grab, I wish it had percentages on the vertical axis, but what it is, it's saying for 1,000 live births, if you happen to be born in the year 1541, for 1,000 people that were born in 1541, by age, it looks like in the low 30s, half the kids that were live births in that year are now deceased, and only half are still living. And as you can see, look at this early drop-off. It looks like childhood diseases got about a third of the population in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. These early childhood diseases were just tragic. I remember stories of people saying they didn't even want to celebrate a child being part of the family until they had gotten to like a year or 2 or 3 years old, because there are so many early childhood deaths. Now, I don't see how anyone can simply ignore a child, but you get the idea that it's just such a tragedy. Well, medicine improved and also sanitation improved, and look what's happened to childhood deaths, to the point where it's hardly even a blip on the chart. And this chart, I happen to grab it off the internet. It ends in 1991, so it's a little bit old, but we've continued to progress. But the other thing has happened. Not only are children surviving, but this line going down here, the reason why it's going down this way is infectious diseases. Infectious diseases were the thing where the bubonic plague hit the county and rolled through and wiped out entire populations of old, young, and in between. Well, we almost closed the book on infectious diseases in the middle of the 20th century, or well, in the 1900s. I was hearing one lecturer talk saying he went to medical school and there's so many diseases that they would talk about there that I'll never see in my lifetime because these infectious diseases are in weird parts of maybe the jungle or remote places now. And so this, for those of you that really are into the math, is called the rectangularization of the survivor's curve. And that is that this is pushing out more and more that we have so many people surviving. It's almost like a rectangle. But notice here that the life expectancy still kind of peters out around, the warranty wears out about age 85. I made that comment earlier. Dr. McDougall had said that. I think we're starting to live a little bit longer. However, okay, and so what medicine has done is helped, medicine and sanitation has helped us with the infectious diseases, which is this stuff, and the childhood diseases. But the one thing they're having troubles with are the chronic diseases, which we're dying of now. And it's not necessarily that we're living old enough to finally get a chronic disease. That I don't have time to go into that, but there's some good arguments just saying those chronic diseases have been around all the time. But the thinking is, with the way that our diet and lifestyle is starting to catch up with us, and it is believed that instead of being more of a sharp rectangular shape, in other words, people live, and then it suddenly drops down, is it's going to get rounded off, much more rounded off. And during the lecture where I was, there was a guy that mentioned that vegans tended to live about 5 years longer. Well, I thought about that, and I said, that doesn't make sense. At the time, I was helping an aircraft, a company that was trying to get a small business innovative research grant with the Air Force to look at parts failure analysis. And I knew enough about parts failure analysis to go, wait a minute. It's not that vegans are living 5 years longer, but everyone else is dying 5 years earlier. And just then, we had a good friend of ours dying of a disease called COPD. Has anyone seen anyone dying of COPD? Yes. Yeah. It's not a pretty sight. Here was a guy who the rest of his body was ready to live longer, but one major system, it was, well, actually a couple, but one major system was failing on him. And he, because of that one system failure, I'll talk about it that way, he died at a much earlier age than I think that he otherwise would have lived to. And I realized that there is by rounding off the survivor's curve, there is such a degree of suffering that is unbelievable, that is related to most of the chronic diseases. Heart disease, diabetes. Diabetes, by the way, has a doubling rate of every 20 years. Well, if you look at where diabetes was 20 years ago and where it is now, it's about doubled, and it's unchecked. It is still going. I think diabetes is going to become the disease that we're going to have to deal with as a country, and I think it's totally unsustainable. But the amount of suffering is unbelievable on that. Okay, let me check the time. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to just read real quickly. what the British healthcare system, in November of 2018, I'm looking on page 5, line 6. Around 20% of our lives are spent in poor health. Megan, get the other video, the first video queued up, that minute one. Okay. And so I'll continue reading here. Around 20% of our lives are spent in poor health. And evidence from across several countries in Europe and North America suggests that the past gains in life expectancy may be becoming harder to achieve. They go on to say, a boy born in the most deprived areas of England can expect to live about 19 fewer years in good health and die 9 years earlier than a boy born in the least deprived area. Now, you can talk about the politics, what they mean by deprived or not, but we're talking genes, human genes, that aren't changing, but is the situation. More than likely, I'm going to say the food that they're eating, so that was the UK. But Canada, I'm looking at line 17, has 2 alternate views of the last 10 years of life. This is only a minute long. What you're going to see is a split screen of one view of the life and then the same, I'll say, actor portraying the other aspect of life. This came from a medical doctor who told me about it, and he found it haunting. I'm going to haunt you guys with it. So, Megan, go ahead. Turn up the volume.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide. The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future at makehealthlast.ca.
Oof. You have the link to it in your notes. It's kind of a long link, but if you Google it, I'm sure that you can find it. I found that there's Dr. McDougall. That you'll find it, but the amount of suffering that we're going to be going through as a society is just enormous. And I really feel for the medical care providers trying to deal with this tsunami of sickness that's going to be happening. Okay, I need to pick up the pace here. Those not awake, lift up your hands. Okay. All right. Okay. One thing that's, here, let me go back one. There we go. Okay, page 5. I want to talk about cancer for a minute. My background, of course, is autoimmune diseases personally, having lived through 50 years of it, and heart disease the last 10 years. And of course, my heart disease was years in the making. I didn't suddenly become heart diseased. It happened over a long, long period of time. And so chronic diseases, we talk about cancer. Oh, the person suddenly got cancer. Does anyone have a guess as to how long it takes that cancer to quote, suddenly appear? Yeah, it's a long time. Now, it depends. There are some cancers that grow very, very quickly. But what I want to do, and one thing my dad taught me, he was one of these scientists that had this logarithmic graph paper. Does anyone see that? Where the lines at the bottom are spaced out a lot, and then as you get further up the page, they get bunched together. Well, what happens when you have a logarithmic, when you have an exponential thing, and the same thing is true of like radioactive decay. He was well, anyway, he was heavily involved in radiation as well. It has a half-life. It's like a door closing. How long does it take to get halfway? Then how long does it take to go halfway of what's remaining, and blah, 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 and it slowly gets to the point. But here, we're talking about, there's some strange lines in there, but anyway, we're looking at a cancer growth. And so I've switched to page 6. And this was just off a spreadsheet. This is a cancer as typical of breast cancer and many other cancers. It doubles every 100 days. So a scientist looking at this would take the logarithm of these numbers, and what the chart would look like is a straight line. That's what that sort of paper does. It takes things that look like a hockey stick like this and makes a straight line out of it, so that early on you can make a projection as to where things are going to wind up. But for us, we look at this cancer cell growth, and it started out way back here with a single cancerous cell. 100 days later, how many cancerous cells are there if it starts dividing? 2. 100 days after that, how many cancerous cells are there? 4. Okay, so every 100 days it's doing that. Has anyone heard of the 1 grain of rice? There you go. Yeah, it's going to take too long to remember, but a little girl in India, I think, saved her village by telling the Raja, I think, of the village that, no, you don't have to award me with anything. All I want is a single grain of rice, but every day for the next 30 days, double what you had given me. And the Raja thought he was getting off easy, and as the childhood story goes, that by the time you get to day, well, whatever that doubling is, I mean, it is like all the critters that could carry bags of rice in the whole countryside had to deliver it to the little girl. Well, that's like cancer. Starts out with 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, so on. It takes a long time to get a million cells. And what I want to say is, when it comes to cancer, we don't even know we have it. By the way, no one raise your hands. For those of you that have active cancer cells in your body, don't raise your hand. See, I told you, we all have active cancer cells, and a lot of them in our bodies right now. Whoops, uh-oh. There you go. Sorry, folks. We all have active cancer cells in our bodies right now. But one thing that most cancers need is it starts with the letter B, a blood supply. Yes. And many cancer tumors can't get beyond a certain size unless they're able to get a blood supply. I recommend that you listen to anything out there. Dr. Greger has a great review. It's called Anti-Angiogenesis, which is what can you do to stop cancer tumors from getting any bigger than about a millimeter in size, about a pinpoint in size. Okay. Yeah. I think this would be a great time to take a break. Okay, we are going to take 5.5. Okay. Thank you. Okay, testing 1, 2, 3. You know, by the way, while we get settled, speaking of the McDougall programs, Dr. McDougall tracks how people are doing when they join his 10-day program. I'm one of the few people that actually gained 5 pounds when I went to his 10-day program, at least in the beginning, and then I dropped the weight. So anyway, but okay, what's up? So I ruined his averages for that class a little bit, but then I continued losing my weight. Okay, there is there's two things. One that we'll look at in a minute is the last 2 pages of the handout. For those of you that are mathematically inclined, it is showing you how food labels are very misleading and how it is that we wind up on a high-fat diet. I was in the age where everything was low-fat. And the way you make a low-fat cookie, I can tell you from a manufacturer's standpoint, is you add sugar to it. Because what you do is you boost the calories, there's no fat in sugar, and suddenly the percentage of fat of the overall product drops. Anyway, so in this case, page 11, Foster Farms, 92% lean, 7% ground fat turkey. You go, woohoo, all right, that is low fat. If you go through the calculations, it's actually 45% fat. Because what they're doing is they're counting the water weight that's there, but a nutritionist doesn't count water weight. The actual nutrients that you're going to digest is 45% fat, 55% protein, and 0% carbohydrate. We'll come back to that in just a second. But first, I want to show this somewhat controversial, I suppose, video of Dr. Greger talking about the food industry. He's being interviewed somewhere over in, I presume, England, and they're referring back to the United States in part of it. But with no further ado, let's go ahead and bring up Dr. Greger's interview. Yeah, here we go.
The industry has found a way, right, to kind of subvert your natural biological drive. We have this desperate need for salt, sugar, fat, and so those are natural biological drives. It's a matter of the industry has taken those same drives, turned it against us. Oh, you like sweet? How about some soda? Oh, you like salty? How about some chips? Oh, you like, fatty, local? That's why we evolved this insatiable taste for sweet, right? And for fatty. Number one cause of death. Bumping tobacco smoking to number 2 now. Cigarettes only kill 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills hundreds of thousands more. So when you think about, this
He doesn't see patients.
No.
I encourage my patients to do it. It's fine.
Okay. So we heard from Dr. Greger talking about the food industry. There's one last very quick demo, and it'll be really quick if I can get 2 more volunteers to come on up. Just all you have to do is hold some cups here. Hilma, can I get you to come up? There we go. The other Mark. Okay. So, hold on. Let's see, food energy. Yeah, blindfolded you. No, this is simple. Okay. All right. So there's a cup of and you have protein and some of it, well, I can hold the fat. So what I have is 2 rolls of pennies. And from a nutritionist standpoint, all food that we eat falls into the categories of carbohydrates, and notice there's the word, what's the word below it there? Fiber. Yeah. And then we got protein over here and fat. Now, if you happen to go on a ketogenic type diet or any sort of diet where they say, oh, don't eat carbohydrates, and remember from that little thing that I showed you that, so Mark sort of turned the other way a little bit. There we go. So the 100% of food energy, there's 100 pennies here, have to go into either the fat or the protein cup. Now, almost all foods, you're going to be hard pressed to have more than about a third protein. You could get more. So where's the rest going? Into the fat cup. Now, if you're trying to go on a keto diet, that's good news. But we've already talked about the long-term health consequences of that. What I want to point out is that when you eat a whole food plant-based diet, the protein stays about the same. And what it is, it's a shift of, unless you're eating pure nuts and avocado, you're eating a fairly low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. Okay? This silly little example, so you can see the protein stays about the same. And really what it is switching here. So then the question is, well, wait a minute, I've heard there's good carbs and bad carbs. That's what we're going to talk about next. Okay. You guys are just, yeah, well, if you need that, yeah. So anyway, yeah, thank you. If I could have Hilma join me here a second. And then, let's see, can you bring up the other slide? So I'm pretty much done with my stuff, and what I want to do is to talk about the foods that we actually eat. And the foods that we actually eat, well, actually, you know what? If you want to look at page 9 of my stuff, there we go. Don't overcomplicate it. That if you're eating healthy carbohydrates, and a healthy carbohydrate is a carbohydrate as grown. Those are plants. There's no cholesterol in a carbohydrate. Actually, what I should do is go to page 8 here. Okay, important notes on nutrients. Fiber. We already said there's no fiber in any animal food. Carbohydrates. There are no carbohydrates in animal food, except for dairy has a little bit of milk sugar. So if you're going to eat a high carbohydrate diet, what do you eat? Okay, if I'm advocating on a whole food plant-based diet, that doesn't seem to leave a whole lot. What do you think, Hilma?
Well, you got that right. So do you want me to start talking now?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, my story begins where Mark's eating meat ended. I remember coming home from work one day, and Mark is cleaning out all of my cabinets I kind of do the cooking. He had taken out all the cans, all the spices, things from the.
Guilty as charged.
He's throwing them out, and I thought, how am I going to do this? Because I really felt that I wanted Mark to be able to eat everything in our home. We had two college graduates that had returned home to live, and I had to feed them. How was I going to do this? And I'm imagining some of you feel this way too. We were knocking out the meat, the dairy, the eggs. Remember, anything that has a face on it has cholesterol in it. And those are the things that we were taking out of our diet. How was I going to do this?
So Hilma, how did you do it? Because we had a couple of kids at home at the time that weren't necessarily eating the same way.
Well, we were kind of in a good place. They had graduated from college and had their first jobs, and were realizing that when you're sitting at a desk all day, you're going to gain weight. So they were kind of for this. Our then my daughter's boyfriend was eating at our home every night. We called him Mooching Matt because my dad called Mark Mooching Mark. Mark did that too. But Matt was so concerned about gaining weight that he actually got one of these desks where you stand up because you burn more calories all day when you stand. People used to laugh at him, but now there are actually desks that you can buy for that. But anyway, Mark and I were lucky in that we ended up having a family situation where the kids were on board because they were realizing that they were gaining weight by not having all the exercise that they were taking every day.
Well, and they knew that I was at death's door, pretty much.
They were worried. So how are you going to do this? You know, you've got foods that you're in the habit of eating that you love. You have foods that are associated with family traditions like, oh, your birthday cakes, turkey at Thanksgiving. How are you going to do that? And as I said, I wanted Mark to be able to eat everything that was in our house. It's his own home. So for me, I kind of had to teach myself. It was, 10 years ago. There's a lot more information out now, and I feel very humble speaking about this with Karen here because she is amazing. She is. You know, so this is the way I approach it. And maybe this is a good saying with you pilots. I feel like knowing where you're going has a lot to do with getting there. You guys are writing out your flight plans and this and that. Well, I feel like the goal is to eat whole food, plant-based. But in the meantime, you've got all this stuff that you have to figure out how to get out of the way so you can have this clean path. For me personally, I thought, okay, I'm not going to do this overnight, even though Mark did. But I'm going to take some time to think about how I'm going to cook. For instance, how am I going to saute, build flavors in my cooking if I can't use oil? So what I started to do was think about what is it about certain dairy meat products that I really like? What can I use in the plant kingdom to replace that? And guess what? There are lots of things that we can use. And I actually, on my own, and maybe you'll discover this too, I discovered that the flavor that we put in our food is all plant-based except for salt. Like even if you are smoking meat, it's not the meat that tastes like that, it's the smoke that comes from, guess what? A plant that turned into a tree.
I don't eat any cows that smoke.
And so that's how I approached this. I started to ask questions of myself in cooking. How can I achieve a certain flavor or texture not using meat? For me, the biggest struggle recently, or the last 10 years, has been trying to figure out how to cook without oil, without using that at all. So you'll see that some of your handouts include substitutes in baking, how to switch out butter, cheese, milk, fats and oils, and eggs. So I'm assuming that people online will be able to get a PDF of this. What I want to mention is this book called Vegan for Everybody, put out by Cooks Illustrated. You've seen their programs on TV. They put out this chocolate chip cookie recipe to die for. It's vegan. And in their description of their write-up about this particular recipe, they talk about eggs. they took the eggs out of the recipe and they couldn't figure out what it was that the eggs were adding to it to begin with. There wasn't anything scientific or flavor-wise that the eggs were adding to chocolate chip cookies. That was a revelation to me. I mean, who here has made chocolate chip cookies their whole life, you know? But so that has caused me also to be thinking about what is it an ingredient really is contributing to the final dish. I believe food has to taste good. And if it's not going to taste good, you're not going to eat it, and you're not going to be healthy. I have come to the conclusion now by...
We have someone here that eats rice paper.
Oh, it's good. I tasted it too.
You like the rice paper? Okay.
But I've come to the conclusion that when you start to take out all forms of oil and fats from your diet, suddenly you're tasting clearer flavors. The flavors are really coming through. I really think fat blurs flavor in your cooking. And you do too? And I just think it's kind of interesting to come up to these
Corn tastes good. I grew up tasting butter and salt when I ate corn.
Yeah.
And I thought I liked corn. I found out that I really like corn.
I find that every year when I bite into my first fresh corn on the cob, that, oh my gosh, I forgot how good this is. Just plain. And oh my gosh, I can go on and on about strawberries and raspberries. You that live up here, Jacob's Berry Farm will open up in July. Oh, really wonderful.
I do have a question of a point of order. At some point, we want a general Q&A. Should we just morph into that and people can ask Hilma? Yeah.
Thank you so much. The how part is not as scientific as, you know, what the medical guys do, but it's where the rubber meets the road, right? Yeah. Like I had people here, Brian, the guy who helped with the sound system, he's not here today. He was, you know, not here to get the information, but he was getting information because we were practicing and setting up. And I'm walking him out to his car carrying equipment, and you could just see the wheels turning. There are health problems between him and his wife, you know, and we get out to the car, and he looked at me and goes like, so what would I eat for breakfast tomorrow morning? I mean, it's that practical, you know. Okay, I got all this information. Today we've had a fire hose from Jim Benny and Kevin and Gordon and everybody. And I asked Karen, I was already eating pretty lean and clean, but when we just finally, I said, okay, I'm on board. Let's do this. And we went into the Rayleigh supermarket together. And I went and I looked, and I just was like, what do I do? Karen said,
He's like, I don't know what we eat.
Yeah, what do we eat?
and it,
Yeah, what's left?
I'm spoiled, so Karen said, I tell you what, you go away. I don't go to the grocery store anymore. Like magic, good stuff appears here. It tastes good, and I eat it, and I'm spoiled. And for most of you, you got to figure out somehow, you know, and Jim Glacken's good at like, I mean, simple things that you can whip up real quick when you get home, and using frozen bird's eye vegetables that you can steam. And I heard you guys talking, swapping ideas on how to do things where you, if you don't want to approach it as an art and a science, it's practical. So thank you so much for getting us started down the road. It's like, what do I do?
Well, I do.
And it's an ongoing process. It's not like all overnight you get it. It's an ongoing process.
And I do want to point out that one of your flyers, I put together 2 easy recipes, and one of them is the most awesome 10-minute vegan black bean salsa soup. It's really good. But, so we talked about fiber earlier. So take a look at the very back chart, and it talks about fiber versus meat, dairy, fish, and eggs. And you'll notice 97% of Americans do not eat enough fiber. In plant-based foods, generally, the higher the protein in the plant-based item, the higher the fiber. And so you can take a look at this, and you can see, meat and dairy, eggs, no fiber. None. Anyway, I just found that really fascinating. When you go to the grocery store, there are going to be whole sections of the store that you're not going to blacken the aisle of the milk. Unless you buy non-dairy milk. You're not going to go by the meat sections. You're not going to go through the cheese. But I can tell you that there are things that you can use, that you can make or even buy, that will give you a good substitute for cheese and for bacon. The item that I use to give that sharp, salty bacon flavor is your bold, salty roasted almonds. I don't know if you've had them before, but just, break those up, stick them in your spinach salad with mushrooms, and you feel like you've got bacon in there. What it's giving you is that salty, that snap.
By the way, we're just going to take a minute. We're going to get the other presenters up here, and we'll have a general question and answer. But yeah, go ahead.
And then for cheese, nutritional yeast was a revelation to me. And do many of you use nutritional yeast in your cooking? Yeah. It was a revelation to me. Mark taught this class at the church, and I did something similar, and I brought some nutritional yeast saying, you won't believe it, this is the weirdest ingredient I'll ever show you. And they all knew it. So it was me who was behind. But apparently it's what movie theaters use to flavor their popcorn, cheese popcorn. It's nutritional yeast.
Many years ago.
That's one of the tricks. Cashew cream for a creamy flavor. You take cashews, and you need a really good blender. So cashews with water, whip that up, and you've got a flavorless, creamy base for all kinds of things, all kinds of cooking. But I feel like you should be talking
So
now.
you were talking nutritional yeast.
Yeah.
So nobody knows what it is. It's not yeast. It's not the kind of yeast that you put for bread. It's different. She can tell you what it exactly is, but I'm okay. You guys can all hear me, right? That's okay.
Yeah, go.
I really don't want that in my face right
Oh, okay. Okay.
now. So
She's talking about nutritional yeast.
popcorn is what we use for cheese, to replace cheese. It's not going to be like your shredded cheddar cheese, but whoever comes back from the Taco Bell tomorrow, we will make a delicious cheese that you can also use to make macaroni and cheese. A pasta a shaped pasta, an elbow noodle that's made from brown rice, and it's healthy. You can eat that. We don't want to eat the pasta that's from white flour.
Right.
So nutritional yeast is made by culturing yeast in a mixture of sugar cane and beet molasses for 7 days, then harvesting, washing, drying, and packaging it. It's sold as a powder resembling cornmeal or in flakes, and it's a major source of B12. Use it to add cheese flavor. Some people use it as a condiment and sprinkle it on their food the same way people use Parmesan cheese. And from people at our church, they just have it on their table. And we're not Seventh-day Adventists. I just thought that was really interesting. If you are baking and you need to substitute out oil and or eggs, you can do that by using ground flaxseed mixed in water. If you've ever done this before, you know that when you let it sit for a while, it actually kind of thickens to that same kind of slimy consistency of egg whites, which to me is kind of interesting, which made me realize different items like chia seeds, if you've ever used those, you put them in water and they start to get sticky. I even noticed that the outside of an onion, the onion skin, you get that wet, it gets sticky too. So I'm thinking it must be some of the same thing going on, that gel that gets sticky. This is the way my mind works, I'm sorry. And the other thing to substitute for oil in baking would be either applesauce or bananas. I've even used pumpkin, something that has that kind of thicker consistency. The thing to watch out for is bananas can actually give their flavor to your baking. I've been able to take family recipes, old recipes for cake, and switch out the eggs, switch out the oil, and it's every bit as good and the dairy as the original. And you can eat it. It's healthier. So anyway, that's why I made sure you had that information.
So before we go off to nutrition, Pierre loves popcorn.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't care if it comes from the movie theater and has oil in it because, well, he loves popcorn. So his brother finally figured out that if we get a spray, and we use tamari, is anybody familiar with this? This one happens to know, it is reduced sodium. Choose that if you can. It doesn't have to be organic. You put it in here, make your popcorn. They have great silicone popcorn poppers now that you put in your microwave, so you don't have to use oil. Air poppers, the ones you plug in the wall, what does it do to it, Pierre?
I guess some of them are better. Some are better than others. My experience is the hot air poppers make it tough. I don't I mean, if
He
you're a
doesn't- he'll
popcorn
eat it,
lover,
but
it's
he doesn't-
okay. This one here in the microwave
It makes a
works
mess
great.
in the microwave,
It's
but
good.
popcorn's not oily. So you just put the popcorn, nothing else in this. I'll show you.
They fold. Oh, good. This one
I just
folds.
discovered these not too long ago as I'm like trying to figure it out. You get a spray bottle, you put the tamari in it, so after your popcorn's popped, put it in the dish, spray it with tamari, sprinkle it with nutritional yeast, do the levels, and you know,
A little bit of
it's,
salt.
actually you probably don't need the salt. He doesn't know this, but this is almost pure salt. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another great use for nutritional yeast.
That's right.
That is a great hit. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I'm going to be squirting
I had
all
to
my
be
food
weaned
out.
off it. At first, I would get the Pam spray and put
Oh.
just a little bit of
Yeah.
butter-flavored Pam. But it was just a little bit of oil, you know. But I was like, oh, okay. And this, now I like it better because, again, as our taste buds and palate change, I don't, you know, you get that oily feel, and this popcorn's cleaner. So we're gonna make Kevin and Jim work a little harder before we feed them supper. So if you guys want to get in the camera, and I'll go around and hand the microphone to whoever's got, whoever has a question. And it's over anything we covered today. So we got 2 doctors,
Yeah.
we got these guys, you can ask Karen if it's about a cooking question, lifestyle diet.
Actually, you know, Evan's now a whole food plant-based, no oil cook. He just learned in the last 3 days.
Yeah, he's become quite good at it.
Help too. He can address the fat issues of bacon.
Yeah, we got some food prep experts back there.
Yeah.
Questions?
Oh, yeah,
I see a
no.
hand
Yeah,
going
exactly.
up. Don't be bashful. Phil Donahue.
You have to own the mic.
You'll be famous.
Live stream. See, it's not going through. It's just so they can hear you online. She's got to, see?
So I've been strict plant-based.
Come on, close. Because they can't hear you.
Oh,
Yeah, on the camera. Yeah, exactly.
so I've been strict whole food, plant-based, no oil. And I have been having the worst gas of my life. Not.
Yeah.
No, okay, you know, everyone has gas. But this is
How long?
exceeding
How,
that.
how long has it been?
For 2 months. And
Give it some time.
And I notice it's worse after we make like Instapot chilies when I have all the dry beans in the Instapot. So
your gut bacteria is changing.
Jim, what about Beano?
Do you make your own chili?
yeah,
If you do your beans, a hint is when you soak them the night before, put in a pinch of baking soda, which in the beginning, when you're just starting to eat this way, that will actually help reduce the amount of gas. The gas. It also helps the texture of your beans. I was talking with somebody recently who said that instead of baking soda, she uses kombu. The dried seaweed. She uses that, and it helps too. Give it some time, because your gut flora is really changing.
okay. Because I notice if I eat more like lentils and whole grains and the rices and stuff, it really dies down. And then as soon as I get
The big beans.
the big beans
The
back
big
in
boys.
there,
Right, the big beans have a sugar in it called an oligosaccharides, really long chain sugar, and they're really high in some beans and not in others. And you'll find that pinto beans will make a lot of gas. And you can soak them overnight, drain the water. That's where a lot of that stuff gets sold. In fact, our new plant-based chef back there has worked in this, and one of the things he was saying, you see all this foam that comes off there? Make sure you wash all that foam off. That's where you get a lot of the extra gas. So make sure you wash them off really well, soaking them and washing them and putting clean water back in. But I try to stay away from pinto beans quite a bit because they make a lot of gas in me, and I've been doing this for a long time, very long time. Black beans don't. So I stick with the beans that make the least amount of gas with me. Now, it's not going to be that way with everybody, but black beans and red lentils make very low gas. Now, if I eat grain lentils, I don't care how much you cook them, I am going to be farting up a storm. It's a good thing no one's in my room with me. But at least if you eat clean, your farts don't stink.
Yeah.
So you can sit there and actually have a silencer, and no one will know. You don't have to go, oh, God, who did that?
I had heard also that there's an advantage to taking dried beans and soaking them. That what's happening is you're actually causing that bean to absorb water and start to germinate. So it actually builds up on the nutrients in it. I just
That's
had to
sprouted.
pass that on.
Yeah, no, it's sprouted. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can do that overnight.
very common reaction.
Everybody gets it. Yes. Yes, and you're still always going to have it. You're still going to make more gas because you're breaking down these long chain sugars. That's the problem. Just like the cows. I never thought of that. Yeah, didn't think about that. But method, yeah, I'm not going to get into that debate. But
global warming.
global warming is a whole different issue. You release the. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But yes, everybody has that problem. They don't want to talk about it. But you can eat the other way. So let's see. Do you want to have a little bit of extra gas, or do you want to have diabetes, heart disease, and every chronic disease known to man? And this is the thing, is you just learn to modify those foods. If you find that you're really having a big problem with them, start out really small amounts and slowly build that up. And you're going to know when you go over the top, because you're like, oh, I ate way too much of those. And you just kind of learn that. It's like with anything. If you drink too much alcohol, I don't care who you are, you can build up a tolerance, but at some point, you're going to get completely sloshed. So if you're going to be smart about it, like, hey, I like to get my glow on, but I don't want to be completely falling down drunk, then you learn where that limit is. And it's the same thing with food. So everybody's going to be a little different. They're going to have a different microbiome. And you can switch that up to a little bit. But, yeah, and you can use Beano. He said Beano. It helps break down the oligosaccharides, the sugars.
I've never tried it, but apparently, you take the pill and
eliminates the problem. If you try a little thing of Beano, and it may eliminate the problem.
I guess as pilots, you
I
wouldn't
haven't
wanna
tried
have
it,
that.
but you can try it. I'm going to eat that any second now.
Yeah, you're supposed to.
I know.
She said you have to eat the mic or they can't hear her. That's why.
So she should have put
it's a plant-based wine.
Yeah.
next to the
Yeah.
face.
Yeah, she should. But that's okay. You're learning, right? So that's good. That's good. You're asking a question that everybody has that question. They're just afraid to ask it.
Oh, I'm
So are you tooting your own horn?
Are we switching gears now?
Jim, you mentioned microbiome. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
The microbiome. So you were saying, you were asking how many more? So you have 3 trillion cells. You have 300 trillion bacteria on and in your body. So that's your microbiome. Then there's your virome. So we have our own virome that lives in us now, and we're just starting to do research in that, which is pretty fascinating. So we're just a product of this whole environment that we live in. The microbiome is the bacteria that live on and in our body, live all over our skin. There's different parts in our mouth, in our armpits, our groin, our toes, everywhere, but including our gut. And you can change that over. And what they found is when you change over to a plant-based diet, you're actually creating the bacteria that actually promote your health. When you eat an unhealthy diet, these bacteria produce very bad byproducts that promote chronic disease. And so you can change that by how you eat. And so that's a very complex thing, and rather than getting on here spending hours doing this, because I'm sure everybody's hungry and we're tired, we've got a long day, but it's a very important thing. And the people that have the healthiest microbiome are the people that eat the whole food plant-based diet, because the fiber that those little bacteria eat create these things called short-chain fatty acids, and those short-chain fatty acids are crucial to our health and without going into whole detail about that. And that's just a little shaving of the top there. If you guys want to look up short-chain fatty acids, these are the things that these bacteria produce that make us healthy. So I'll leave it like that, but it's very important. So remember, you're 100 times more bacteria than human cells. You're just a big bag of bacteria. Like, remember that pig pen on Charlie Brown? When he's walking and he's like that, that's what happens. People are like, oh, I don't want germs. I said, you know what? You just came in this room with me. You just shared all your bacteria with me. I shared all my bacteria with you. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't see it. It's microscopic. All of this being here this whole weekend, this whole place is just plastered with everybody's bacteria. There's nothing you can do about it. But the thing is, those bacteria that are on your body also protect you from the other harmful bacteria that might come from other people. But as you share microbiomes, if you have healthy ones, you're showing the healthy ones. If you're around unhealthy people, you're showing the unhealthy microbiome. That's one thing they know in dentistry. Don't share toothbrushes because their microbiome, if you go take their toothbrush and a person that has very unhealthy mouth, dental stuff, and you start using their toothbrush, you'll take that unhealthy bacteria and implant it in your mouth. Kind of weird to think about, huh? So the cleaner you eat, the healthier microbiome you have, the healthier the better they're going to protect you. Yeah. You can't wash it off. What's that?
Can I borrow a toothbrush?
Yeah.
Go ahead. But I think the more you expose yourself to certain elements, the more efficient you become at warding off all of that.
Absolutely. They know that with allergies. The people that are growing up on farms that are exposed to the most allergens, the most bacteria, have the least amount of autoimmune diseases, the least amount of allergens. The people that are grown up the most isolated are more susceptible to everything on the planet because they're not exposed to it. And all of a sudden, when they get exposed to it, their body just kind of freaks out, and it has this overimmune response. That's where we see allergies and autoimmune responses. So the more that you're exposed to, it's actually better. But the way that we talk about everybody, oh, they have germs, you're going to die. No, you're not going to die. Most things don't kill you. You know what's going to kill you more than germs in our society is our diet anymore. We, as you saw the graph that he showed, all the babies died in the first few years of life. Now you don't see that. Now what's killing us? Our chronic disease, which is from our diet. So don't worry about that so much. Just eat better. You'll have a healthier body, healthier microbiome, healthier virome, and hopefully you'll live a long, healthy life.
All right, I'm gonna. This one's for people close to me. Someone sent me this book. I won't say who, and they said, "Hey, you're into this nutrition stuff. Talk to me about this book. It's called The Plant Paradox. Dr. Was it Gundry? And I went on YouTube and read a couple things. I went, no, I think he's probably a quack, but I'm not qualified. And so maybe if either any of you are familiar, either say it's good or it's quackery or whatever. He's talking about lectins in plants, and you got to be careful what plants you eat and how, and take seeds out and cook them certain ways and all that. So anybody?
Well, he certainly made a lot of money. I've got a mic. And Steve Gundry was one of the cardiac surgeons at Loma Linda when I was a resident there. And at that time, the famous thing that Loma Linda was famous for was putting a baboon heart in a human baby. And I don't know if it's true. I've looked at it, and he's against nightshades and tomatoes and things, and I have a hard time believing that has a huge impact. But he also has a lot of data and or pseudo data on how it affects your biome and ultimately your health. And I don't know if Jim, you have thoughts on it, but he has certainly made a living in wellness and promoting his way of wellness.
Well, what I think is interesting is that, so lectins are in all the foods that you've been eating here. So all the plant foods, all the whole grains, all the beans that give you all that gas, they're all full of lectins. And most societies on this planet, if you look, have been eating whole grains and beans as their staples, and potatoes, nightshades, tomatoes, their whole life. And our population is exponential. It's not going down. I don't see people coming into the ER or in my office having problems with lectins. They're coming in with heart disease, which is the number one killer is animal products. So this is the thing, is he's kind of baiting and switching. It's like making it sound like this because now he's going to tell you can have shrimp and egg yolks. That's like in his very first paragraph of the book, which is a horrible, is pseudo science. He's taking a bad research article and trying to make it sound good. But the only way you're going to know this is if you go and look at these citations and you go look it up on the internet and read what he's actually talking about, and then you're hold on, this isn't making sense. But if you just read it at face value and you want to believe it, great, because then you go to his website, you become a VIP member. Now you can buy all his products. You can buy lectin blocking supplements. It's only $100 a month. You can buy his new skincare line. You can buy all this stuff and keep buying and buying. And it only costs about, I think it's $2,000 or $3,000 a year if you want to buy all this stuff. So this is the thing, is that he's got, this is the thing, I'm not selling anything. I'm just trying to get people to eat healthier. He's got a whole product line he's selling. And you got to ask conflict of interest here. Anytime somebody's coming out and saying something, and then they happen to have the magic cure to protect you from what they're trying to tell you is killing you, but nobody else on the planet has it, you got to ask yourself why. As though. Kind of the Gwyneth Paltrow of. Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, yeah, that's a.
She's a lot better looking than Steve is.
A lot better looking, and she's a lot better products.
Got a question from the internet. Randy Lambeth. Hi, Randy's joined us from Atlanta. He says, use the mic. Sorry, I didn't have the mic up close enough. Let's see, I think I'm registering now. Jim Glacken, question for Dr. Benny. The RDA for fiber for a male is 30 grams. The average American male gets less than half of this. However, when looking at rural populations, such as in China, Africa, and South America, their fiber intake's closer to 80 to 100 grams. How much fiber does Dr. Benny, target for his daily intake?
Thank you, Jim. I've never actually calculated it because I don't have a problem with fiber. How do I know? Because I can poop faster than I can pee. So I have no problem with us coming out the other end. I've never had to worry about counting my fiber because everything I eat is pretty much fiber because I eat all plant-based. So it's probably that's where he's going with this. Is I don't even worry about what fiber I'm getting. And he's absolutely right what he said. We want people to have at least 25 to 50 milligrams of fiber in their diet. Most people don't even get probably 15 to 20. But rural populations that eat all plant-based are getting 80 to 100. So I don't even worry about it. I just eat all plant-based, and I'm eating all the fiber. And believe me, I do not have any problems. In fact, sometimes it's like, am I going to have my third stool for the day? I'm just going to be honest with you. There's no problems there. So I don't really target a number. I just eat whole food plant-based, and if I had a problem, and I'll tell you, with all my patients I've ever seen, if they're eating whole food plant-based, I have never heard them ever once complain about constipation. So to me, it's like that makes it more complex, so I don't want people to get complex. Maybe that's where he's leading me. I want you to make it as simple as possible. Eat more whole plant foods. You will not have these chronic problems of the typical American diet, the standard American diet, the SAD diet.
You won't break the toilet.
Yeah. What's that?
You won't break the toilet. You won't break the toilet.
Well, you might with volume. You might break the toilet with volume. Yeah.
If I could add one thing about nutrition, and that is eat the colors of the rainbow, that your nutrients, your vitamins really are in the vegetables and fruit that have the most color. So when I make dinner, I aim for red, orange, yellow, green, and sometimes blue. And I figure the more color, the healthier we are. So, blueberries. Purple beets.
And purple yams
carrots.
and cabbage.
Yeah, I mean, have some fun in the produce section.
Right. Yeah, don't be afraid to try new things. If you don't like it, throw it out. It's okay. Put it on your compost pile. Oh, you can do that. It's not meat. You don't put meat in your compost pile. So,
we have a question.
If you don't like it, throw it in your compost pile, and now you've got great stuff that your garden's going to love.
I have a question for the doctor.
Which one?
The smart one.
No.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Both
Don't
of
make
you.
me do ortho
Both of
surgery.
you. How important do you think it is to eat organic food?
Organic food is great if you can afford it. What I tell my patients, and a lot of my patients can't afford organic food, so this is what they found, is organic is not as clean as you think. They're still using chemicals, some of them very toxic, but it's been approved to be organic, okay, in quotation marks. So they've done studies, and if you just eat a regular broccoli versus organic broccoli, the amount of nutrients you get in the organic, all you would have to eat is one more sprig of the non-organic broccoli to get the same amount of nutrients. Just wash it off. Not with soap and water, not with some weird chemical, just wash it off with water.
I'm more concerned with like pesticides.
Yeah, so you're going to have pesticides on most organics too. It's just not what you think is pesticides, and some of them are highly toxic. So you're talking now a whole new subject where you got to delve into what's toxic. So the best way to have the most organic is you grow it yourself. And that's a whole different ball of wax because there's a lot of time involved with that. Because then I make sure I don't spray anything on it. I go out and pick bugs off. It's a lot of work, but then it's like you reap that harvest. But when you're buying organic, it's just like buying free-range chickens. Is it really free-range? Because technically, I opened the cage for 3 seconds. It could have jumped out, but it didn't. It was scared. I've never been out there.
But the free-range chickens had the parasites.
Right. Yeah. So this is the thing: is that just because it says organic doesn't always mean it's the healthiest. It doesn't mean they don't use pesticides. If you can afford it, great. But a lot of times they charge so much for the stuff. Just buy it. Buy it frozen is a lot of times better than fresh. If you can buy fresh, that's great. But frozen, they're usually doing it in the fields, and they're cleaning it there in the fields. So you're getting something that's fresh frozen that has a lot more of the nutrient value than something if you're buying it's been sitting in the shelf in your produce department for a week. So yeah, it's great. Everybody wants to buy organic, but if you can't afford it, it's very expensive, and you don't have to eat that way.
For me,
I am a non-organic guy. Look at this.
Clearly, but if money was no object, would you just pick the organic?
Most of the time, yes. Yeah.
I think for me, what I do is
Studies that they've tested people's blood after they've gone to eating organic, and the amount of chemicals and stuff in their blood is dramatically reduced after they go organic.
I'd have to see that. I haven't read that.
But you're talking about, you say, well, it's reduced by 50% or so, 80%. Well, it went from 8 molecules to 3.
Yeah.
So in other words,
Right.
What you eat is the freight train, right? So as far as the organic and non-organic, the pesticides, I think there's a generic paranoia about pesticides that's way out of way out of, I know, no, but I'm saying, but it's been publicized, it's trumpeted, it's, oh, this is awful, we're all going to die. What's killing people is what you eat. I mean, the pesticides are infinitesimal in terms of their, I know, I'm just saying that they're infinitesimal in terms of their ability to, or their likelihood of killing you compared to eating a couple of lards of bacon. So I think it's just put way out of scale. A lot of the stuff is way, way out of scale in terms of what its real likely effect is. That's just my opinion, but it's all based on stuff that I've read. And even in Ames, who's the guy who actually created the mutagenicity test that is actually used for determining how mutagenic foods are and the effects of pesticides, he completely debunks organic food. The guy who actually invented the test, that, you know, because he says the relative effect of it relative to what you eat is so small that you just don't worry your head about it that much. It's just way overemphasized. That's my opinion.
So my personal preference, if it's something you're organically going to eat the skin of, so if you can eat an apple, I prefer an organic apple. If you're going to peel a banana, I don't care if it's organic or not. If you're going to eat an avocado where you don't eat the peel, I don't care. You know, salads maybe. The problem with salads, a lot of them have, you know, E. coli contamination stuff. It's more prone on organic food. So there's trade-offs, but a general rule of thumb is, you know, if I'm going to throw the peel away, then I don't really care if it's organic or not.
I'm not a doctor, and I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn last night.
Tonight, I'm staying in the Holiday Inn.
But you are.
Yeah.
I run I own a certified organic candy factory. So you can buy lollipops for your kids now if you're going to give them a little treat that are organic. And, you know, I at first rolled my eyes and I laughed. It's another company that came to us. We built the product line for them. They've been wildly successful, and they're doing great. And as a result, it's helping me do great. And I'm a little less will roll my eyes about it. It's because it's a lollipop. We know it's a treat. No one's selling it as a health food. It's like if your kid's good and he eats all the right things, and you don't want to give him the ordinary lollipop. You give him this one. It costs a little more. You buy them at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or whatever. And the only thing I'm a little bit of a believer on is we use no artificial colors and no artificial flavors in it. And the fact that the sugar and the syrup is organic, to me, is, you know, sugar is sucrose, you know, and glucose is glucose, whether it comes from brown rice syrup or from corn syrup. So I'm a little skeptical on that, and I don't want to poo-poo because, hey, you know, it costs more and it's more profitable for me to make it. But it does eliminate on processed foods, not on fruits and vegetables, but on highly processed foods. If you're going to have a treat like a peppermint or a lollipop or I don't know, eat an occasional cookie or something, believe me, we spend thousands of hours and probably $250,000 a year maintaining organic certification, where they can trace all of our materials right back to the source, upstream, downstream. So it's not, and we pay.
So it's very regulated.
Oh, we pay. And it's private. It's not government. So
it's
we.
Not like they're going to be sneaking stuff in on.
Oh no. If it says certified, I mean, unless someone is absolutely being criminal about it, and for all I know, that's happening. But it's more stringent than any government supervision we have. We have to get these auditors in. They audit all the documentation, all of our facility. So if it's something is certified organic on the package, it's gone through that process. So if you're going to eat a processed food, and we're all about not eating processed foods here, but as a treat.
I used to work for the Certified Organic Farmers of America, and she used to talk about the process they went through to inspect things, and it was pretty regimented, and the pesticides and whatnot were.
Yeah, no one can hear you on the
sorry.
streaming.
Anyway, she used to work for the Certified Organic Farmers of America, and she said they were very diligent about what was being able to be used on the, you know, the foods and the farms, and they would go out there to inspect them. And it wasn't like they were using stuff that was secret stealth pesticides. I mean, I didn't hear that. And she's a pretty smart cookie, my daughter.
We got a question from the internet. It's a good one. Randy Lambeth, who's a great Copen from Atlanta, he says, I'm curious if any of the panelists in general eat 3 meals a day or typically more smaller meals, and follow-up is, does it even matter from a blood sugar standpoint?
I don't know about the blood sugar, but we actually eat just one big meal a day. We'll have a smaller breakfast, oatmeal usually, and then something light at dinner, but we have one major meal a day. We get full. It's high fat fiber.
I'll have to say, sneaking a couple of leftover snacks. What's really wonderful about this type of cooking is that invariably in some nice, in our case, in the refrigerator and some glass bowls with plastic lids, there's leftovers. And if I'm working away on something, it's always nice to go to the refrigerator and grab a big spoonful of it and stick it in the microwave or whatever. And so you get kind of a quick little pick-me-up during the day, but it's something that was cooked, last night or even a week ago. It's amazing how long foods will stay fresh that have been prepared and put in as leftovers.
Well, I suppose it being high fiber starts to give an answer about the blood sugar.
Yeah, so what she's saying is that high fiber foods, whoever I'm talking to out there, they slow your sugar absorption into your body. So it's definitely a better way to go, and you don't have to worry about the sugar spikes as much. Personally, I have 3 meals a day, but my breakfast meal I actually eat while I'm driving, which you probably shouldn't do, so don't do that. But it's just oatmeal and almond milk with berries on it. But I'm starving by the time I'm getting in my car because I've usually worked out. And then I get to my desk and I'm already okay. And then throughout the morning, as I see patients, I'll usually just keep taking a couple scoops of it, and it just sustains me. So I don't want to sit down and just gorge myself. Not that that's probably a problem eating plant-based, but it's just more convenient for me to eat smaller meals. And at lunch, I usually have one large, usually a Mexican field meal, beans, rice, corn tortillas, salsa, that kind of stuff. And and that usually holds me till dinner. And if I do, I'll usually have Lara bars sitting in my desk, and that's what I'll eat. And then a Lara bar. They're whole food plant-based bars. There's no other ingredients other than like whole food ingredients: dates, nuts, seeds, whole plant foods like strawberries, mangoes, that kind of stuff. Cacao, yeah, no, I said that, dates.
What do you think about intermittent fasting, which is a growing trend?
Yeah, so if you want to intermittent fast, it's actually good. There's a lot of science coming out with intermittent fasting on it for extending your life. If you want to extend your life and live longer, there's a lot of really good data that lowering your calorie intake, even below just a whole food plant-based diet, gives you a longevity. They've done tons of studies with animals and even humans for quite a long time. And if you're looking at life extension, decreasing your calorie intake has a big impact on long-term longevity. I'm not into that. When it's time for me to go, I'm going to keep eating. I'm not intermittent fasting. I feel like I am anyway, eating the way I do sometimes because I'm like, I need to eat more. I'm out here like I need another potato. I'm starving. No, I don't.
Yeah, if you're curious, there's a fairly recent book by a guy named Walter.
Yeah.
It's like Walter with a V. Walter Longo.
USC.
Yeah, who wrote the longevity diet.
The longevity diet.
It's pretty good. I have a hard time with it. I like to eat, but
Randy,
anyway.
to answer your question, hi Randy, how you doing? Fellow Eclipse driver. So yeah, and answer your question, I think I mentioned when I went on the plant-based diet, I was still eating 3 meals a day in the volume that I was accustomed to, and I kind of shockingly lost about 12% of my body weight, or 11%. I lost 18 pounds, which for me was a lot, and I was like I say, I was really surprised by that. So, and I like to eat, so I discovered that for me, when I went on this diet, I started eating between meals a little more, having some nuts or fruit. So I'm kind of eating a little more through the day, in addition to my regular 3 meals. So I mean, what could be nicer? I can eat more and weigh less, and I feel great. And so that was my experience with in terms of meals.
Randy and anyone else interested in this topic, I highly encourage you tune in tomorrow when we have Ray Cronice talking. I got a little sneak preview listening in over Jim Benny's shoulder. Ray knows more about this, I think, than most room full of doctors put together, and he'll talk to you a lot about fasting and the line I remember is, would you run a checkbook where you're only allowed to write checks up to the amount of your deposits that day? Nobody runs a checkbook that way. So he says you're ignoring the balance. And so anyway, I'm not going to begin to try to preview Ray's talk. He's good. So Randy and anyone else interested in frequency of eating and the usefulness of fasting, he's got a lot of good information on the topic. Okay, we got another question over here, live one. By the way, for Cirrus drivers, just excuse me, I allowed a Mooney driver into the room, so Mark here is a Mooney driver.
I just a question on protein. Look at this handout here. And I see like meat's got 35 grams of protein per 4 ounce servings. The best legumes have about half of that, and most of the substitutes have about 10% of what meat has. How do you keep up your protein level and make sure you're not losing body weight and muscle, mass?
Yeah, if I can jump in on that, and then you feel free. The real question is, how much protein do you really need? Okay, and you answer that question first. We're overfed when it comes to protein. For example, human growth formula, which you would have to presume mother's own breast milk, is about 5 to 8% protein. When have we heard of a recent outbreak of protein deficiency anywhere within the civilized United States? It's not there. Now, there are many people that pack the protein in, and I think that they're being very hard on their bodies in doing that. The protein powders, the protein shakes, and so on. I believe that's very ill-advised, and I'll turn that over to the medical folks on that.
So I don't even worry about that. I kind of used to worry about it, but then it's just to me it's deflecting the whole issue. It's trying to make it like, okay, there's no way you're going to get as much protein on a plant-based diet as you are in a meat diet, and you're absolutely right. And that's what I showed you earlier about BUNs, blood urea nitrogen. And what were the ones that always had the problem? The ones with the highest nitrogen levels. Too much protein. And that's what we see is dangerous. And you can't do that on a plant-based diet. You saw all those people, they're eating as much. It's an ad libitum diet at McDougall's. You can go back and serve your face as much as you want over and over until you're puking. And then do it again. And you can't get over a BUN of 8. So the protein in there, and none of those people that are eating that way are ever deficient. What they're deficient in is they're deficient in the fiber before they come there, and now they're getting all the fiber that's making them feel bloated, but they're getting an adequate amount of protein. So it's not at first I was like, well, is this going to be an issue? And now I've been an athlete for many, many, many years, and I've never had that problem with any kind of protein. I recover extremely well. I perform at an elite level, so it's not something I worry about. And I showed you all those pro athletes on purpose because they're all plant-based. And yeah, they aren't as big as the other guys, but they aren't juicing like the other guys too. So there's a whole other aspect that makes those guys super huge. And we know those guys are juicing. I know some of those guys. They're all juicing. And even some of the younger guys do. But that's Mr. Natural, they're tested all the time. You can't juice. So they aren't as big, but they're adequate. And you know why they get that way? Because I get a lot of patients who'll say, oh, I need to gain weight. And I ask them a question they never thought of. I said, well, do you want to gain muscle weight or do you want to gain fat weight? Well, of course, muscle. Well, then you better start going to the gym. You better start lifting weights because the only way you're going to put muscle on your body is you have to have a resistance to tell your body that you need to have a bigger muscle to push against that resistance. So you can't get muscle weight just by sitting around. You sit around the couch, you become the couch potato. You go to the gym, you become the gym person, right? So your body is the most adaptable thing on the planet. It completely responds to whatever you do to it. So if you sit around, you're going to look like a couch potato. If you go to the gym and you do push-ups and you do all that, your body will respond with muscle mass and increased bone density. So your body is the smartest thing on the planet. It doesn't take a cell and just throw it out and make you poop it out and then require you to now eat everything that it just pooped out. Your body is actually the most amazing recycling factory on the planet. Every single cell, it takes out and recycles what it can keep. I'm going to take those amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. I'm going to take that cholesterol if it's something I need. If not, I'm going to make you poop it out. I'm going to take this fiber. I'm going to take all these nutrients and all these minerals and I'm going to store them, and then I'm going to remanufacture millions of cells every single day. So it's remanufacturing those. So we only need in a normal diet about 2,000 calories, which is very little from what our bodies, if we took what we're actually remanufacturing every day, we couldn't keep up with that. So our bodies are these incredible recyclers, and when your intake goes down, your body's metabolism slows down, and it stops. It just slows down. It knows it's not getting it. It's not going to put that energy out unless it absolutely has to. So that's the way our bodies are geared, so we don't have to worry about the protein question as much, but that's what we hear all the time. But where am I going to get my protein? We always say it as if I could just have 5 cents every time I've heard that, I would not have to practice anymore. And it's probably true. What's your take on protein?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it's well known that it's essentially impossible to be protein deficient in the United States. I mean, there's kwashiorkor is the medical term for it. I think there's not been a reported case of it in my lifetime, probably, except for very rare cases of starvation or people that are truly deprived of food. But if you're allowed to have food, you're not going to be protein deficient, and we all get much more protein than we need. The cows and the animals and stuff obviously have the ability to digest plants a little differently than we do through fermentation and stuff. But I think the flip side is okay, say you make the argument, okay, I need to get protein from some sort of animal source, and where are you going to get it? And it's, I kind of wrestled with this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do the fish thing. And, the problem is fish is really polluted. And, unless you're eating little tiny fish like sardines and anchovies and stuff, which most of us here aren't super excited about, and often when you eat those, you fry them and then they're terrible in oil. And so if you go to big fish that we, like to get, like, farm salmon and even wild salmon, they're not very, clean. And when I was up fishing in Alaska, it was interesting, I mentioned that earlier. They have a big problem up there where the natives are allowed to keep large halibut. And so they get these 300 or 400 pound halibut and they feed their entire family for a year. I think when I look at them, they've all got mercury toxicity and they've got dioxins and PCBs. And they're really trying to discourage the native population from keeping these big fish. So figure out what your protein source is and where you want to get it from and how much you need. But, be very careful about getting it from wild fish sources. And I think that's a real, worrisome concern. I'd be far worried about, everybody probably heard in the news the Howard Stern story. He released his biography a couple weeks ago, and one of the things he mentions in there, he's getting treated for, about ready to start chemotherapy for a blood cell problem that they thought was kind of a blood cell cancer, and finally somebody tested him as mercury toxic because he made a health decision to switch gears, and obviously it's an anecdotal story and it's Howard Stern, but it sticks, to go more fish-based protein. And he ended up almost poisoning himself to the point where he was considering taking chemotherapy, which is, whoops, so, go eat some beans and legumes and, rev those up. And, if you need 2 cups of them instead of 1 cup, have at it. So.
And the other thing to add to that is that the plants don't take up those toxins. The toxins are on the outside of the plants. The plants don't have the ability to take up those toxins. Now, with all the animals, they're eating it and it's being processed through their body and it bioaccumulates in their tissue, preferably in the fatty tissue. So that's the big thing about plants is they just don't have that mechanism to take these toxins up. So as long as you're washing the outside off, you got a pretty clean source of protein.
Yeah, we accumulate it because we have long lifespans and we eat lots of, typically lots of animals. And those animals, eat more animals, and by the time you're at the top of the food pyramid like we are, it's the magnification or biological magnification is pretty substantial. So
this whole journey into whole food plant-based eating has really caused me to question a lot of my assumptions about diet. Where did I get the idea of how important protein is? I mean, that was my question I asked people. Where do you get your protein? What do I know about protein? I think that we're brainwashed through a lifetime of advertising. Give this a try and see how your body feels after a while. And boy, I'll tell you, you feel a lot better if you're not ODing on protein. And if I could add one more thing. We were asked about organic versus non-organic, and the question of expense came in there. I think this is a cheap way to eat. I really do. If you're not buying meat, you're not buying dairy, you're not buying cheese, you're saving a whole lot of money, so spend a little bit more on some of those organic products.
Point.
Also, on the protein thing, we have a family member that was not believing me and actually wanted deeper information. So I took the 27 essential proteins, I forget the number now, in a spreadsheet and compared that with food. You would be hard pressed to construct a whole food plant-based diet that is deficient in any of these proteins. We say protein, that's just a number, but it's made up of lots of different items within that protein number. So anyway, again, I think the only way that you can be deficient is if your calories, if you somehow restricted calories and you're starving, then you've got other problems.
Just anecdotes. I got no data, but this guy, when he mentioned being an athlete, I considered myself an athlete. He kicked my butt so hard. I mean, we weren't trying to be competitive. He was trying to be nice. I've only had about 3 people I've been behind who've ridden me off their wheel. Cyclists know what I mean. I was drafting him, and I couldn't hold it at a couple of points, okay? And secondly, my friend who wanted to be here, but it was a delay at Mount Everest, is on his way back from successfully summiting Mount Everest and not dying, which this year was a big deal. That mountain, the pretty mountain you're looking at right here, for me, it was a big accomplishment to climb it from the valley floor here up and ski down Job's Peak. It was a warm-up for him. He wanted to go out and do more that afternoon, like you, the animal, wanted to ride more. And Robin is the strongest guy going uphill with Pat. I was going up. He had, I think, 2 or 3 gallon jugs of water in his pack just for ballast because he was training. And we were going up, and he's walking away from me. He could have carried me up the mountain. He's whole food, plant-based. He eats no meat at all. So the 2 strongest athletes that I've had very up close and personal experience with this year have humbled me. I mean, they're amazing. So anybody wants to talk about protein deficiency, I'm here to tell you doesn't happen. We're ready for dinner. Oh, we got another question, and then we'll do 1 or 2 more. And one thing, just before I do, because I'm going to forget, we got a request. If you guys just part, I want to show the food spread for the people viewing from away. Which way am I going? Up? Up? Evan, say hi. Evan Jacobs, Karen, we got Jade. We got the chafing dishes all closed, but believe me, tell us what we got. Oh, someone here, pass him a microphone. Someone describe what's in each dish.
Oh, okay. All right, well, we'll start on the far side. We'll start on the far side. All right, in this first chafing dish, we have aluminum foil. The mashed potatoes. We have mashed potatoes. We have a lovely oil-free gravy. We have an oil-free lasagna. We've got a lovely garden salad. We've got 3 types of dressings. We have a oil-free Caesar, an oil-free ranch, and oil-free vinaigrette. We have a very nice balsamic vinegar as well. We have these lovely parfaits, and we have a lentil loaf that'll go with the gravy and the mashed potatoes. We have a lovely spread. It's great.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure you all wish you were here to try the food.
We ate lunch at 2.
Sweet.
And chocolate brownies for dessert.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes.
So you talked earlier about the olive and expressing the oil and then it being processed, so you can't have the olive oil. So how is it when you have peanut butter or tahini or almond butter or any other butter, when you process it and the oil rises to the top?
Then you pour it off.
You pour it off so you don't mix it in?
But that means you're eating something that's very old. If you've seen it separate, it's been sitting there for months. You go to the Winco or any place, any health food store, and you can go to the peanut bin. You make your own peanut butter. It can sit in your refrigerator for 4 weeks. It's not separating out. Most of the time, it's eaten by then. So, yes, should you chew it? Yes, because there's digestive enzymes, but you're still chewing it when you're eating it. And it's a little different than what you're talking about. You're talking about extracting an oil from an olive, but you're just eating the oil. You aren't eating all the fiber in the olive, where when you're talking about grinding up peanuts, you're still getting all the nutrients in the whole peanut. It's just you're grinding it down. It's still a whole food. It's processed, yes, but you haven't extracted just the peanut oil out of it and then go eat peanut oil. And so that's the difference. And if you actually go to the McDougall program, the old McDougall program, and not to speak bad of them, but there was no olives allowed, there was no avocados allowed until the very last day. And since then, since John has kind of retired, I've seen those things creep in, and my personal experience is I've seen blood sugar start to go up. And so I know how they affect it at a very minute level. And you're like, there wasn't that much, but it's affecting them. And they don't think it's affecting them. So if we want to get really strict, we don't add any, there's no peanuts allowed, there's no peanut butters allowed. We don't have anything that's a heavier cream. That's the only tofu dressings, but it's a lot more strict. So you can do it less strict, but you're not going to get the best numbers, in my experience with doing this, unless you're eating really strict. And only 5 days. 5 days of eating really strict, you will see amazing numbers. But you just got to do it.
So if I wanted to eat not really strict for 6 months,
Well, can I finish answering, or just one thing that she said? I don't have with me, but there's a graph that I have. It's a chart showing nutrient density, which is basically the amount of nutrients relative to the calories in food. And one end of the scale, the highest end of the scale is kale in terms of nutrient density. And there's all different foods going up in a big bar chart. And the one at the very end, which is the worst one, is olive oil. So in terms of nutrients you're getting per buck, per calorie, per energy you're getting, it's at the very worst end of the scale where kale's at the very best. So just give you that scale also.
All right, sorry.
So you talked about. You talked, or she asked about the. Boy, the question went out of my head now. In 5 days.
healthy.
In 5 days. Getting healthy in 5 days.
Yes.
What if I don't want to go that extreme? Could I do it in 6 months and still achieve the same
It
results?
depends on what your goals are. You got to ask yourself what your goal is. And this is what I ask my patients. What's the goal you want out of this? What do you want to achieve? Right. I think anybody can go extreme for 5 days, but there's people I can't even get to stop smoking one cigarette. Right?
That's true.
One cigarette. Okay, you're smoking 20, let's smoke 19. How's that going to happen? So that's the thing. It depends on what their goals are. And this is what I ask. What's the goal you want to achieve? Do you want to reverse your diabetes, or do you just want to make your numbers look a little better but still take your meds? And so it's all about your goals, and that's what I have to meet those patients where they are. And that's all I'm trying to do. It's like, that's what Ray Cronus, you'll hear him tomorrow, is like, if you aren't willing to do this, I don't want to see you, and I'm not sure you're willing to do it, so I'm not even going to take you as a patient. And they're offended. But that's what he wants. He doesn't want people that are going to do it half, because it doesn't work when you do it halfway.
That's what I was trying to get
Right.
at.
So, but if you only want to get half results, then you can do it halfway, and that's better than probably where you were. But to really get the big benefits, you really need to jump headfirst in and just do it. They have the 21-day vegan challenge, 30-day vegan challenge. Ray Cronus is 84 days. Watch, I'll make you lose all your weight in 84 days. And he will. He's done it with 1,000 patients. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. But you're looking at a longer-term thing, and that's why he won't take people that are willing to just give up. I don't want you, if you aren't going to do this the way that it needs to be done, but we'll have fun and we'll make humor out of it. But you got to ask yourself, what the goal, what do you want to achieve out of this? That's the really important question. So always look back at yourself, what do I want to achieve out of this? What is that I want to feel and be and do? Right? If I want to be the best athlete, and I really have to look at everything and say, what is it going to take for me to be there? Am I willing to sacrifice everything to be there? What is it going to take? And so it's learning all these things, and just be honest with yourself. What are you willing to do, and what are your goals?
I think there's an implication in your question that you're going to be making a big sacrifice if you went all the way. And I think that's probably the thing that I found out was I didn't have to sacrifice my satisfaction with eating. Not only in quantity, but also in the quality and just the enjoyment of food. So for me, it wasn't like, well, I'm going to have to give up this, and I have to give. It was more like, now I'm going to do something different, but I'm still going to really enjoy it. Or actually, I'm enjoying it in some ways even more. So it isn't like, well, I'll have to sacrifice. It was just, this is different, and it's just as good, if not more enjoyable. And then it isn't so much of a leap. It's just different, but it's still enjoyable. So that's what I would say.
If I may plug a book, going back to the olive oil and the olive, one of the most beautiful books that we listen to through Audible on our long car trips is the book Whole, W-H-O-L-E, by T. Colin Campbell. It is a beautiful book, and it talks about the reasons why you want the whole fruit, you want the whole grain. And it reads aloud really well. We had a chance to talk with him at a McDougall seminar, and we told him how beautiful it was to hear it aloud. And he said it's because the last thing he does before he puts a book out for print is they read it aloud. Beautiful book.
I wanted to ask, I think I understand the problem with oil. One of you showed us a cool slide left and right with the rabbit who was fed some oil, and it slowed everything down horribly. So my question is, what is it about dairy that is bad? A low-fat milk with the granola and the fruit, or a cheese? What is the problem there?
There's a lot of things that are a problem with that, so it's kind of a more complex. But the thing with the non-fat, okay, is the casein, and that's what T. Colin Campbell showed. that you could turn on and off the cancer genes in animals and even in humans by giving them dairy. And that's well studied, and that's a protein issue. So eating non-fat milk is potentially even worse than fat milk, because now you're boosting the protein, which we know is what turns on the cancer genetics. And so dairy, look at this. Are you a baby cow?
Negative.
Exactly. You don't need dairy, period, end of story. Right? I can just say it like that. Why are we the only animal on the planet that decides to take another animal's breast milk and feed it to us for our whole life when the own cow baby gets kicked off by mother at like 6 months? But all of a sudden it's good for us. You got to question that logic. Because what do I go to the giraffe and go, mama? No, I don't do that. But why is a cow better? I could. You're right. I never thought of that. Maybe I do. Wow.
It really doesn't have anything to do with logic. It's just that ice cream tastes so good.
So you're absolutely right. It's because of the sugar. It's because of the fat, right? And they might add salt. But you can get, if you really want ice cream, they have non-dairy versions that are way better for you. Like Ben & Jerry's makes cashew.
Ben & Jerry.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Jerry
almonds
Garcia.
and soy that you will not even know. And you're just like, this is like not real. You're reading the ingredients. Like, seriously, you didn't put any milk in there? Oh, wow. Yeah, but you can still get fat off of it.
The way Karen got me to buy the expensive Vitamix blender is we blend frozen bananas and just a couple other ingredients in there, and we make fake ice cream that.
And it tastes great,
I'll eat
especially
that
with
until
like
coming
cocoa
out of my
powder.
ears.
Oh my gosh.
And my son knows I like soft serve ice cream, and I can drive right past. The only thing I ever ate at McDonald's for the last 30 years was I'd get the $1 soft serve ice cream.
And I'm sure that was really healthy.
And,
probably
it was
not 50
low fat.
ingredients in that.
It was iced milk. It was not ice cream. So in my mind, it was low fat, and it was dairy, and sure. But now my substitute is the banana, and anyway, I don't know.
Much
the
better.
parfaits, I don't know what the parfaits are made out of tonight, but let me just say, I don't know nobody don't like no parfait.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, it's the casein in cheese that makes it so meltingly wonderful, and that really is difficult to imitate in plant-based cooking, but you can do it. Have any of you ever over-whipped potatoes when you're making mashed potatoes? Yeah, you see how they get really, really
So the
stretchy?
starch turns into glue, yeah.
There are wonderful recipes that taste like cheese, and you don't need casein in cooking.
That's interesting.
I will say also, as someone that went to the very edge in terms of heart disease, the other challenge with a high-fat diet, unfortunately any fat, be it plant-based or animal-based, is for some people it causes you to your own body to make cholesterol that you don't need. And cholesterol for anyone with raving heart disease is an issue. So that's why Dr. Esselstyn recommends his patients, not a drop of oil. He does not go after the nuts and seeds in avocado for his severe heart disease patients.
Say it like he does. Come on, do it. No oil.
No oil. Not a
Moderation
drop.
kills.
Moderation kills.
If your house is on fire, do you want to keep spraying gasoline on it with a slightly smaller hose?
Yeah. Exactly. He's got a good point, right?
Yeah.
All right. The cooks, I think, are really dying to have people eat their food. So we could probably go on, and tomorrow we'll have another chance. I can't thank everybody enough. All of you guys up here. Let's hear it.
And thanks to Pierre and Karen and everybody online. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a long day. We hope you join us tomorrow. I'm not trying to upstage Pierre here, but I just want you to know we appreciate you watching as well.
And 9 o'clock, Ray Cronise, he's amazing. I can't even begin to describe this guy. He's a genius savant who's we're just going to try to corral him to talk slow enough and specifically enough that we can follow him.
And also Juliana Hever will also join us. She's an amazing dietitian who put together a Mediterranean diet. It's no oil Mediterranean diet, and they created, what was it? I think in
92 recipes.
In what? How many? Like 2 weeks? It was 3 weeks.
We had to wait 2 weeks to schedule a Skype call with them because they were working round the clock, except for sleeping, assembling this book with 92 recipes.
Right.
Yeah,
So
they're
they got some
intense.
good stuff for you tomorrow too, as well. So.
Yeah. All right. Enjoy. Eat up.
Thank you.
Manja.